appropriate to start now. I'd like to welcome everyone here. The emergency evacuation procedure in the event of a fire alarm sounding. Please leave the room calmly via the lobby area and the main door of the City Hall. Turn right, walk down the ramp towards the cathedral, and the assembly point is in front of the cathedral. I'd like to welcome everyone to this, and particularly the members of the public who have come to see Democracy in Action, and also everyone watching the webcast at home or at work. To those in the room, the Council Chamber is a room where we can have an exchange of views, and we ask everyone that they speak with courtesy and respect. We have 9 papers to get through today, as well as a number of statements and questions, so I'm going to have to move this along quite quickly. I'd like to welcome all the members of the committee, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Councillor Weston, because you're substituting for Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Mark Weston, Conservative, substituting for Councillor Morris, who is ill, but back on Monday.
Councillor David Wilcox, representing Lockleys.
Councillor Emma Edwards, Bishopston and Ashley Down Ward.
Rob Bryer, Councillor for St George West.
Nicholas Coombs, Westbury and Henleys.
Councillor Self, Southmead.
Tim Rippington, Brislington East.
Don Alexander, Avonmouth and Lawrence Weston.
Welcome to all. And as mentioned before, apologies for absence from Councillor Morris. Have we got any interest to declare in relation to the items of business on the agenda, colleagues? I'll take that as a no. I'm going to move that the minutes of the previous meeting of the committee held on the 6th of February are a correct record. Would someone like to second that, please? David. Nick, actually, members of the public are not invited to comment on the minutes. That's a matter for councillors only. So I'm sorry, I have discussed this with the clerk of the committee, and as far as I'm concerned, the minutes are correct. I think Adam said that it's not going to cost an awful lot to turn things into tokens, and I think that's a reasonable explanation that it's within the available resources, I think, is a reasonable record of that comment by Adam. So I'm going to keep going on. So would anyone else like to raise any matters arising from the minutes? Nick and then Rob.
Thanks. Item 10, CRSTS project delivery. It's been recorded that I asked for a progress update on the delivery of the CRSTS, but that's not been received since the last meeting. I wonder, do we have a way of tracking actions like that?
I've seen a draft of that. I've just signed it off in the last day or so, so that will be coming your way very soon, Nick.
Mine was just to ask about, in the minutes it says about the nighttime economy letter. I just wonder where we got to with that.
You have to say that again. It's too fast.
Sorry.
I understand you.
I was wondering where we got to with the nighttime economy letter, because that's mentioned.
That's been sent to councillors today for comment. I'm sorry that it took a little bit longer than I would have liked. So we're happy to sign those off as a correct and true record. Great. I've got, so the next item is item 5, Chair's announcements. The only announcement I really have is that there's a number of officer decision notices been made since and published since the last committee agenda. If anyone's particularly interested in those, one of them is for the up to 8 years of maintenance contracts, which is obviously a multi-million pound figure, so you might want to look at that because it's going to define years of maintenance as of this September. Right. Now we move on to the public forum. In this committee, we tend to hear the statements first and then have the remainder of the time for questions, so they're presented first. Could I have a show of hands, please, of people who are here to make a statement? So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we tend to allow 15 minutes. Hopefully you know that for statements, I'll start my timer now. Hopefully you've been warned that you're not necessary to read out the entire statement, but you've got really, should be trying to limit it to a minute and summarise your statement. All the members of the committee have read all the statements. So if we could start with, I'm going to assume the first one on the list is Melissa. Hello, Melissa. Would you like to start your statement, please? And if we can try and limit it to a minute, that would be much appreciated, Melissa, to give everyone a fair chance.
so disgusted. I have nothing to add to my statement other than I am now a prisoner in my own home. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. The next I have on the list is number 5, Susan Hughes.
Bear with me a bit, because I've got a vocal condition.
Okay.
I want to start with saying I'm absolutely against the disgusting and discriminatory East Bristol unlivable neighbourhood. This has been implemented without a proper consultation. The council have lied about sending letters out. They have lied about consulting disability groups. The two they claim to discuss it with, the first doesn't even exist, and the second have never been spoken to. Many people without internet or email knew nothing about this. I speak to many now who still don't know what's going on. I received one letter long after the so-called consultation ended. This so-called trial has already been proven to be a failure and caused an immense harm and trauma to thousands of people. Traffic and pollution have massively increased. This is preventing access for disabled residents, causing us to need to make massive detours, causing vast increases in pain, fatigue and stress, to the point we feel we've had our independence stolen. One resident can no longer access their own home in their disability vehicle. This is disgusting and completely unacceptable in every way. The council in ETM have now turned up at 3 a.m. in the morning, bullying and intimidating their way through residents, several of which with disabilities.
Susan, if you could start wrapping up now, please.
ETM assaulted myself and physically restrained me through my mobility scooter, preventing me from moving back. And these big burly men, all whilst ignoring the basics of health and safety, suspended a plant above my head. I implore you, do the right thing here and abide by the Equalities Act. The council currently ignored. If you have a shred of integrity, immediately reopen those homes, or you have blood on your hands.
Thank you. Next, I believe, is Nick Davis. Can we get you a glass of water? Okay, you've got something. If we could move on to Nick Davis, I want to try and give everyone a chance who's taken the time and trouble to come here tonight to be able to make their statements. Where have we got the mic? Nick, if you would like to make your statement.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'll summarise my statement and be quick. Generally, it's great to see some genuine ambition and something being done rather than just talked about in Bristol on transport after a long while when not much has happened. On the East Bristol local neighbourhood, I want to congratulate the committee and officers for showing determination and leadership. On the Park Street and the Triangle, I want to again congratulate the committee on showing a willingness to take out a gyratory, and the same with Bedminster bridges. Those are real obstacles to cycling, and also the proposals would be much better for people walking and catching the bus. On the Triangle Park Street, Park Street does need some changes for cycling, which we can go into in detail. And finally, I'm sorry to resort to a more traditional negative mode, the Portway, I simply do not understand why we can't get to something close to a 3-metre shared use path when there is space, and we could still have 3.5-metre traffic lanes and 3.2-metre bus lanes, and just do the junctions, and the thing would at least be a kind of B standard. It's not going to be AAA, but it could still be of a reasonable standard. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Next on my list is number 29, Stuart Phelps.
I'm slightly surprised that you don't have the statutory guidance on implementing low traffic neighbourhoods on your agenda, because it came out on Monday. It has 5 significant points in, but it's probably best summed up by the opening paragraph. Last year, the Department of Transport commissioned a review of low traffic neighbourhoods. This is the outcome. The research shows that while they can work in the right place, and crucially where they are supported, too often local people don't know enough about them, haven't been able to have a say. Increasingly, they are frustrated. We see larger and larger low traffic schemes being proposed by some councils despite concerted opposition by local residents and local businesses, and in some cases being removed again. This guidance makes it clear that should not happen. There are 5 points made in the guidance: that local support needs to be the majority, that your consultation process needs to be robust, and that it has regular reviews even after implementation. And perhaps most significantly, because as far as I'm aware this is a major sea change, the potential consequences of you failing to follow the guidance are that there could be withdrawal of future funding and possibly taking control of your roads under the Traffic Management Act. In other words, putting you into special measures. And finally, DVLA data usage is now being questioned, and there is going to be consultation, which may well restrict your ability to use that on bus gates and the like.
Thank you, Stuart. That's your time. Thank you. Next we have Dan Aykroyd.
Is this one? Yeah. I just wanted to say I support the Triangle, Queens Road and Park Street improvements. However, I do have really quite serious concerns about some of the details of the furniture as laid out in the documents. Not sure if those are final ideas, but I'd really like to work with the council to co-design those bits of street furniture to avoid conflict between pedestrians and cyclists at quite a few junctions.
That was, I think, from your statement, particularly University Road, wasn't it? Yeah, thank you, Dan. Next we have Luke Hall. Not here? Okay, Liz Reed.
Is that on? I'm a pensioner and I live within the East Bristol Liverpool neighbourhood. I've been waiting 30 years for Bristol City Council to do something about the pollution in this city, and I'm overjoyed to be in the first area to be chosen. I look after my 3-year-old grandson, and we're now able to go for walks pretty safely along Beaufort Road and go to the park without having to put him in a buggy in case he runs into the traffic. I've also seen other little children out. A couple of them are smaller than mine, and they're just living their best lives, and this is what this should be about, and I'd like to thank the council for doing that, because they're obviously too little to come here. I do have some frustrations with a minority of protesters who have held this up, but I would like to see our neighbourhood become much, much more than just traffic calming. I love the Buddha that somebody's put in one of the planters. I'd like to see neighbours cooperating, sharing lifts, walking their children to local schools. I think there's a real possibility of the Netham being able to become an Orion dark sky area. And of course, we should be able to do things like community composting and perhaps have our own VE Day celebration around the War Memorial in the cemetery. We have to have a vision for our future, just like for those children.
Thank you. Next is Dave Redgewell. Oh, well done. Thank you. Dave, if you can try and keep it to a minute, please.
Queen's Road rather, runs down from Blackpool. Queen's Road, Park Street, want to see that go ahead, but there's still work to do with the buses. Make sure, I've been with First today, the designs will work through with First and Stagecoach, and particularly the National Express stop. That is, we're going to have side-loading coaches, Ed, from probably FitzBus, so we need to plan that into the design. That is a very important university stop, and it's also in the Western Gateway transport strategy. Also, we need to make sure that people still got access to the shops, to the museums, and to the to the park and the neighbourhood around the back of Park Street, and make sure tourists can move. So we just need to balance that properly and go forward. The other point the First made is the pinch point is also coming in on the centre, and we really need to get those buses through the centre from Park Street. That's the real pinch point that needs addressing by Wecker and
Thanks.
Council.
Thank you, Dave.
Just finally on the other two, very quickly.
Dave, that really is, you've had over a minute now, and I am going to...
we support the other two, but there needs to be further design work on Bedminster and the other one. Thanks, Redcliffe.
Thank you. Next, Matt Sanders. Matt, you've been here many times, and you're pretty good at summarising your statements in a minute, so off you go.
Claim. Sorry, could you not hear?
Yeah, do you want to start again?
Okay, sorry. In public statements and press releases, council officers repeatedly claim the signage installed surrounding the Cumberland Road bus gate is compliant with the latest guidance and legislation from the Department for Transport. Yet that is simply not true, as I have demonstrated on numerous occasions. The Traffic Penalty Tribunal only judges whether a bus gate signage provides adequate information about the restriction, and some adjudicators base that assessment only on the signs at the bus gate itself and ignore deficiencies in advance warning signs on the approach, even though they often acknowledge that many deficiencies are present. But is adequacy really what the council should be striving for? What about doing the job properly? What about following the DFT's guidance and doing the best job possible as any reasonable person would expect? And then officers would not need to lie to the public by claiming that the signage is compliant with the latest guidance and legislation, because it isn't.
Matt, that was exactly a minute. I think you've rehearsed it, haven't you? Thank you. Brendan Taylor? No. Caroline Dunn? Salem Bennett?
Hey. So I'll try and summarise. I live in Barton Hill. I'm particularly worried because just down the road from me in Silverthorne Lane, there's hundreds of new accommodation, housing being built, and obviously that's important because of the housing crisis. But that will bring increased amount of congestion into Barton Hill. Obviously, some of those people have cars, etc. And I'm really concerned that if the East Bristol Liberal neighbourhood isn't implemented, then that congestion will create a less safe environment for children and disabled people within the area. And I'll just add on to that, just kind of over the last week or so, it's been a real joy to see sort of children and feeling like they're able to sort of go out into the streets and like draw like chalk on the pavement, chalk on the roads and stuff, and how sort of play in their areas a bit more and be able to go out. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's kind of sees so many kind of nostalgia stories from parents, especially sort of saying, "Oh, back in my day, like children used to be able to go out and like play and whatever." And I feel like this will help us return to that kind of environment. In terms of the protesters, I firmly, and I'll finish on this, I wasn't happy that like the police turned up at 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever time it was in the morning, but I don't think there was an alternative. You do not need a huge amount of people to stop roadworks from taking place. The fact that a couple of protesters are able to do that does not demonstrate that a majority of the community support opposing the scheme.
Thanks, Sonam. Councillor Emily Clark? Councillor Fabian Breckles? Is there anyone here who's come to make a statement that hasn't been able to speak yet? No. Okay, shall we move on to questions? So the first question is from Mary Lyon around the closure of Park Street. Is Mary here? So questions 3, 4 and 5 are from Matt Sanders. So Matt, I don't know if you've seen the published answers to your questions?
Is it on? Yes. Yes, about an hour ago. Just to... Are they there, in fact? Okay. This was about Traffic Penalty Tribunal appeals against the Cumberland Road bus gate, and I pointed out the Traffic Management Act says where an adjudicator has questioned or criticised a local authority's traffic signing, the authority should review the signing. And I asked what efforts had been made to review the signing after receiving 3 damning tribunal decisions that I quoted. So the answer confirms, obviously, those decisions have been ignored and nothing has been done. Officers also included some misleading statistics. You can see there.
Did you want to turn this into a question, please, Matt?
Yes, okay. Well, I'll just point out that they've claimed there that only 20 appeals have been in favour of drivers. I know there were more than 20 before Christmas, so it must be a lot more now. And also they've ignored the fact that the council does not contest a quarter of all appeals, so that doubles, because they know they can't win, so that doubles the number of cases that drivers are winning. So those statistics are completely misleading. Anyway, supplementary question then. My first question on there related to a tribunal decision on 9th of May last year, where an adjudicator decided in favour of the driver because he considered advance warning sign on Cumberland Road was not adequate. A week after that decision was issued, I submitted a dossier to the council itemising numerous defects in the signage, including many of the same issues mentioned by the adjudicator, and as a result, the BBC requested an interview with a newly elected transport chair, and he requested a briefing from the officers. So on Monday, 20th of May, Mr. Crowther, the Strategic City Transport Service Manager, compiled a briefing document, which is this, which included the claim the Traffic Penalty Tribunal has considered appeals regarding the bus gate 6 times, and on all occasions, has upheld the penalty charge issued and been clear that the design is acceptable. But just 11 days earlier, the council had lost the appeal that I've quoted in the question on the 9th of May. So my question is to Mr. Crowther, why did you tell the transport chair that the council had won all tribunal appeals when that obviously wasn't true?
That was the information I was aware of at the time. If something had happened recently before that, I wasn't aware of that.
What department? You sent that document at 11 p.m. on 20th of May to Patsy Mellor, John Smith, Sean Taylor, Alex Hearn, Sarah Clark, James Coleman, and said, briefing note attached, let me know if any change is required. Are you saying none of those people knew that you'd lost that appeal, even though in the answer to my question, you say you consider the results of all appeals? None of you realised you'd lost that appeal, apparently. Okay.
Is that the question? Or because you've got one more question. Can we get straight to the question, please?
Okay, the second one then. On the next day, Tuesday, 21st of May, Executive Director John Smith forwarded that briefing notice to the Transport Chair over there, and then advised him not to be interviewed by the BBC and instead issued a statement to the press. And on seeing that statement, on Wednesday, 22nd of May, Mr. Crowther emailed Mr. Smith, Mr. Hearn and the press office to say, this doesn't reference the fact that the Traffic Penalty Tribunal has ruled in favour of us on every occasion a ticket has been appealed to them. Could this be clarified or is it too late? So Mr. Smith replied, I added this extra detail in a note to the reporters yesterday evening and heard it mentioned on Radio Bristol this morning. So my question to Mr. Smith then is, did you know you were conveying untrue information to all of these journalists, or did you believe what the transport officers had told you?
I did not know. If it was not correct at the time, I did not know.
Okay, shall we move on? Dave Redgewell, you've submitted 2 questions, so you've got, hopefully you've seen the answers. They should just be appearing on the screen, so you've got up to 2 supplementary questions.
So I suppose, as I am concerned, my follow-up question is simple. Have you met on site yet, to Adam Crovier or to the director, with National Express or with Flixbus, to look at the actual layout? Because putting a wheelchair lift ramp down at university is not the same as putting a bus service, castle curb and drop curb chair. So I wonder, this is quite important, this is the main university coach stop for this part, for Bristol actually. Thank you.
So
is that meeting going to take place?
The question is, has any transport officers met with National Express or Flixbus?
Sorry, I haven't checked with the team if they have, but I will certainly check if they have. If not, I'm sure that's something we can arrange.
So I think you've got a commitment to arrange that. So second follow-up question, Dave?
Yeah, my second follow-up question is really on the issue of the Friary. I welcome the works on Temple Way, but as you all know, I'm part of a DFT working party at the moment on integrated transport and the white paper. It's been some of the meetings I've been to a lot more. Can I have assurances then that the works that go on in Temple Way fit in with the works on the master plan by the West of England Middle Combined Authority, the Transport Authority, will fit in to make sure the buses, the coaches, ferries, are absolutely integrated at what is one of the most important transport interchanges in southwest England. I just want assurances, because the last time we had a lot of cycle lanes and not a lot of bus interchange. This time we need to get the buses and the trains and the ferries right. So that's all I want is assurance that's going to happen, because that's government policy.
Yeah, the schemes have been designed in knowledge of each other, so yeah.
Thanks, Dave. I think it's also worth saying, I think a lot of the work on Temple Circus was done in anticipation of the Temple Meads work happening much more quickly than it actually did, and I think the City Council did that in good faith at the time. Nick Davis. So hopefully you've seen the responses to your questions.
So I believe I have two supplementary questions. This is working, I hope. The first one is on access points. I've seen reference to on the Portway. This is access points on the Portway to those being for cycling to the shared use pavement track on the river side. I've heard reference to those access points being redesigned as dropped curbs or hop on, hop off. I want to clarify what is meant by that. There is good standard design guidance in chapters 9 and 10 of Local Transport Note 120. There's plenty of expertise, including which the Cycle Campaign has access to. Can I assure myself that those access points will be designed in accordance with best standard and not just the odd drop curb, which can be fatal to cyclists if there's a fast-moving car behind who doesn't realise you're going up on the drop curb. Many crashes occur that way. First question.
Yeah, anything we put in would be appropriately designed and would be checked through our quality assurance process.
Does that mean LTM 120?
LTM 120 is a guidance document, so yes, we would use that to inform our designs.
Please, for the notes, that means LTM 120. Thank you. The second point is there will have to be a statutory consultation on the Portway, which has been conceded in the answers. It seemed to be in doubt from previous answers. Will officers and the chair, as appropriate, commit to meeting with members of the Cycle Campaign and other community groups, including the Walking Alliance, to ensure that the shared use pavement is built to as high a standard as possible, including width, and it can be considerably improved without impinging on the 3.5 metre traffic lanes and 3.2 metre bus lanes, particularly alongside Shirehampton Golf Course, where there's a lot of spare traffic space, and also around some of the trees at Sylvan Way and the Portway Park and Ride, where more verge could easily be taken. Thank you. Second question.
The TRO process has always been part of the scheme. There's never been a point where it hasn't been. It's a statutory process where we invite objections to understand if there are any specific issues with the proposals as set out following all the previous engagement and consultation. As such, there would not be a significant amount of engagement with stakeholders and groups as part of that process.
So you're declining to meet with us?
I didn't say that. I said we'd be following our standard PRA process. Whether we would meet with you or not, I don't think we've considered that as yet.
I'm willing to meet if there's a clear agenda for the meeting and we understand what the constraints are before we start.
Absolutely, I can assure that, and talking about very minor changes.
Caroline, just in time, we've done the statements, I'm afraid, so we're now on to questions. You had, I think you submitted 2 questions, and if you look at the screen, the answers to your questions will be there. And if you want to follow up any question, either of those 2 questions.
Sorry, due to severe ill health, I've been ill most of this week. I have got out of bed to come here. I would appreciate it if you could read my questions out for me. They are very hard for me to read at the moment at this distance. And I would appreciate it if you could make reasonable adjustments and allowances for that. And give me the questions and the answers. I had hoped to be able to read the website before coming today, but my heart, which the top part is going at over 300 beats per minute, the top half, prevented me doing so because it said I had to sleep. So the time I had allocated to read the questions and find out the answers, I was knocked out by the heart. And I had no control over this. Thank you.
So I'm going to ask John Smith here to maybe summarise the questions very briefly and then read the answer.
Okay, well, shall I read the questions now? I'll read as quickly as I can. So question 16, why did the Avon and Somerset police officers with drones and contractors and others turn up at 3 a.m. on Thursday the 13th of March 2025 to carry work in the East Bristol Liverpool scheme? Who authorised this in Bristol City Council? Who authorised this in West of England Mayoral Combined Transport Authority? How much extra did it cost? And why was it thought necessity to disturb the resident community at that time of the morning? Question 17, was this action by Bristol City Council with the Police and Crime Commissioner Claire Moody or the Chief Constable Sarah Crew before the operation taking place? And did either of them authorise it with Bristol City Council, the West of England Mayoral Combined Transport Authority Mayor Dan Norris? What was the total cost of the Bristol City Council and the West of England Mayoral Combined Transport Authority Mayor Dan Norris and the Avon and Somerset Police and Crime Commissioner Claire Moody? So the officer response to those questions. Thank you for your question. Bristol City Council sought support to ensure the health and safety of all involved with the installation works following protests that had disrupted previous unsuccessful attempts to complete the East Bristol Liverpool neighbourhood between October 2024 and January 2025. Ahead of the installation, Bristol City Council informed Avon and Somerset Police of the planned works. Police officers were present on site to support the installation process and facilitate any peaceful protests that occurred. Any matters related to costs or operational procedures involving the police should be directed to Avon and Somerset Police separately. The scheme's implementation was authorised on the 3rd of September 2024 with the relevant documentation published here, and there's a link then to a decision notice that was made previously around the implementation of the scheme. The West of England Combined Authority had previously approved the outline business case for the project in March 2023. The installation costs are fully covered within the allocated capital budget from the City Regional Sustainable Transport Settlement as approved by the West of England Combined Authority.
I'm sorry, you have not answered any of my questions. Who in Bristol City Council authorised the implementation of this at 3 a.m. in the morning? My questions are quite clear. They're not perfectly written because a friend put them on his phone for me because I was away from my Chromebook, but they are perfectly clear and quite understandable. I want to know who specifically in Bristol City Council authorised this outrageous event at 3 in the morning, completely unnecessary at 3 in the morning.
Okay, so that's a question.
And also, it's quite, no, this is not a supplementary question. I'm just making it clear to you what is already clear in the questions I've already put forward. I also make it quite clear I want to know how much money was spent on this. I have put these questions forward in time through due process. They are perfectly understandable, they are perfectly clear, and you have not answered any of them. I appreciate you can't answer the costs for the police, but you have not answered whether any consultation was taken with either the WECA Authority, the Police Crime Commissioner Authority in person, or the police in person. And there must have been somebody in the police that you put the request in for the police who then authorised it, possibly the commander of Bristol Runners. I don't know. My questions are quite clear. I would like the answers.
So, okay.
Yes, so I'm very happy to answer the two questions. So I think the first one was who within Bristol City Council authorised the implementation. That was myself as the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration. As is clear from the link in the answer there, the way that decisions are made in the Council is the relevant policy committee authorises a particular thing to be carried out, and then I, as the Executive Director, am authorised to implement. So I was aware that the operation was happening and I authorised it. My name is John Smith. I'm the Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration for the Council.
So can we have one final question, please, Caroline?
Authorised that this be carried through at 3 in the morning with police, with drones. Now, I do understand due process. The whole thing has gone through committees. It has all been put through a very long process of discussion at committees and authorisation for the works. And the general scheme overall has indeed been authorised at various points by various people and various committees. I understand all that, but my questions are quite clear. Who authorised this extra, completely outrageous 3 a.m. implementation of works? This is over and above anything anybody on any committees following due process in the last 6 months could possibly have envisaged they were signing up to. And I just would like to know the answers to my original questions, please.
So, Caroline, I think you've had an answer to that question. You've asked that question twice now, and John has given a very clear answer to you. Caroline, that's a question. I'm willing to take the question, how much extra money did it cost?
So in terms of the council's costs, I'm afraid I don't have that figure, but I can get it for you and I'll release it through the chair if that's okay. Yep.
Caroline, I think Caroline, I've made a Caroline, we have made a commitment. We have made a commitment to answer your question about how much money it took. I've already made a reasonable adjustment. Caroline. Thank you, Caroline. We're going to move on now because I've already made a reasonable adjustment to extend the public forum by about 6 or 7 minutes. And thank you for your questions. Thank you for coming in today. And I'm going to move us on to agenda item 7, which is the response to the full council golden motion, Make Bristol the UK's most accessible city. So the purpose of this report is to respond to the golden motion approved at full council on the 8th of October 2024 and to discuss the Bristol Climate and Nature Partnership's inclusive transport for vision for Bristol. As part of the golden motion, 15 measures have been listed with officer responses to each one. This forms part of a wider motion for Bristol City Council, which will lay out how it intends to become the UK's most accessible city. I'd also like to mention that there's a corporate response going to this for things that are above and beyond the Strategy and Resources Committee to in April. Right. Right, Caroline, I'm going to ask you now, please. Caroline, as I start, you won't hear it. Thank you, Caroline. That's, I'm glad we can move on now. So, Adam, would you like to just say some introductory words about this, and we'll move on.
Yeah, so this report is the response to the full council motion. It sets out the 15 points that we were asked to consider and the measures that are being taken in response. I won't go through all of the responses. Just to look at a couple of them, placing the Bristol Climate and Nature Partnership's inclusive transport vision on the committee's forward plan for discussion at the committee. That will be action before the end of the 24-25 financial year. And then the other one I just wanted to highlight as a piece of good news we engaged with the Combined Authority over recently was work with the West of England Combined Authority to assess options for extending the hours of operation of the Diamond Bus Pass scheme. So that has been actioned and they'll be able to use their cards at all times. So that's some positive outcomes that we've already seen. There are other responses included in the response to the motion. One other point I would make, I've also been discussing with the DFT who are starting a task force on accessibility, and I discussed this with them and said I would forward them the motion if and when it was approved by committee for them to consider.
So I've got Tim, Kaz and Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Adam. Yeah, I think we broadly welcome this response. Just got a few questions. Point 5, can you expand on the issue of drop curbs and the idea that SIL funding may be used? As you know, the amounts of funding available varies widely from one committee to another, so this approach doesn't really seem fair. It makes it a bit of a postcode lottery. I'm wondering if we can look for other sources of funding for that rather than looking at doing it through SIL. Point 8, just a reminder that we're commissioning new bus services in April and hopefully September, some of which will use stops which have been out of action for some years. So please can we make sure that these are included in our review? of bus stops. Point 9, very much welcome this. Look forward to hearing more on this. Point 11, I am concerned that the Parking Task and Finish Group is dealing with an awful lot, and more issues seem to be referred to it on an almost daily basis. I'm wondering whether it has actually achieved anything as yet. A bit worried about the amount of work that is being piled into that Task and Finish Group, to be honest. And finally, point 15, excellent news on that one. Congratulations on getting that.
Okay, so
I was going to answer one or two of those questions, if I may. I don't think it says that it will necessarily be SIL that will be used. It's what the proposal is to ask area committees to identify where the priority drop curbs are. Once we have an idea, I think it's a really good idea to build on the local knowledge of councillors within their area committees. But I don't see anything that actually says that it will be necessarily funded by...
I think it does. I think
possibly
yes.
using SIL funding, but not necessarily. So we will be looking. In fact, we've got something on the agenda later on, which is looking at kind of maintenance and budgets to change things, which are recurring budgets. And we'll certainly be looking to take the intelligence from the area committees and see the best way of funding those going forward. So neighbourhood SIL is only one of those opportunities.
Okay, fair enough.
I think 9, you're just commenting, I don't think that was a question about the disabled tax class vehicles. Yeah. And on 11, we're going to bring a report to the next committee on the progress that the Task and Finish Group is making. So I think it's probably best, if that's okay, we'll actually bring a short written report to update on the progress. And, sorry, Adam, carry on.
I was just going to come in about point 8. So yes, we've commissioned those new bus services. We are running full speed to get pole and flag bus stops out so that they can stop. They won't be fully accessible immediately, but obviously we'll be upgrading them as and when we can. But yeah, we need to move fairly quickly to get the flag out so that the bus can actually have somewhere to stop. But yes, we will look to make all of our stops fully accessible.
Kaz.
Yeah, so thanks for the responses. Just a few brief points, Chair. I was really pleased that Labour Councillor Kelvin Blake brought this motion and that we were able to pass it, albeit with a bit of tinkering from the Green Party. A few brief points. When I knock on doors in Southmead, I quite often hear from residents about accessibility to the centre. And with so many schemes coming forward, we need to make sure that disabled people are listened to and that parts of the city don't become no-go areas. I was going to mention the curbside and parking strategy group, but I think you've kind of covered that one already. Public transport needs good provision for wheelchair users. We're talking about Hackney carriages later on, and obviously they're very accessible for people with wheelchairs. And I think there's more to be done on this whole topic. There's still inaccessible bus stops, train stations. Bus drivers aren't as accommodating as they used to be can always be with people with mobility issues. But I think the motion and this officer response is a step in the right direction, so thanks.
Thank you, Kaz. And I think it's worth saying that some of the things in here are obviously going to be quite a long-term thing. We're not going to fix all of this in a year or so, and we're really going to have to look carefully at how we kind of mobilise what budgets we have to try and achieve some of these things over probably a number of years. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I've got a question and then a statement, if I may. 14 talks about parking charges for disabled users, and obviously it talks about on-street parking, it talks about service car parks. I just wondered where disabled charging for the estate car parks. Do we charge them or are they free? I confess I don't know, which is awful because obviously Blaze Estate's in our ward, but I don't know if someone could clarify for me. Could we check that? Because if we're applying it to all other City Council's car parks, it really should be source of goose, source of gander, if that's all right.
Sorry, we're just questioning the estates. Can you clarify what do you mean by?
Well, you've got Albury Court and Blaze, for example, where we charge those car parks. So it's not highways, it's parks that do the charging there. But we're saying we're giving 3 hours free on all other bits. I'm not sure we do in the estates, but if we could check.
We don't in parks.
I find that a bit of a dichotomy that we give it free in every other car park. So we don't charge, or we do charge? We don't charge. I find that a strange dichotomy that we don't do it anywhere else except in our parks.
Can I just clarify, we do not apply the same rates in parks, they are much reduced.
I still think we've got an issue there, if I may. And building on Councillor Rippington's comment on number 5, on Sill, I actually agree with him entirely on it. There's an estate in Henbury Branch, it used to be in Southmead, Charlton Gardens. There's not a single drop curb in the entire estate. But we, in our neighbourhood partnership area, we're the least funded in the city. And also, it's not in one of the deprivation areas. So the chances of it getting any neighbourhood funding to ever retrofit a single drop curb is essentially nil. So if possible, I really think that should say possibly using neighbourhood facility funding, but also looking at other options. I do think it needs to be a bit clearer.
I think that's fair, and what I think the corollary of that is that it would be really good for area committees to really think about and focus so that we can get the most important drop curbs done, certainly in the near term. Don and then
Thanks. Just a reminder to everyone that many of the people who are disabled in the city actually are suffering from heart and lung complaints exacerbated by the pollution caused by transport. That's recognised in our transport policies. However, those who comment on transport projects often don't acknowledge that it is the pollution from cars which is actually killing 300 people, largely from cars, killing 300 people a year in the city, and that's very serious and has to be a driver of our transport policies and projects.
I think that's a good point. There's a range of impairments that people suffer from, not all of which are visible and not all of which are mobility, but may be more internal and affect people's mobility. Rob.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to raise a few points. One, it's a classic case of perhaps asking a question that I know the answer to because I've been told it recently. I'm interested in point 8 about Parsons Street and Lawrence Hill stations and their need to be accessible. I just wanted to know where we're up to with that. I also thought on a related note to that, I understand there might be some work around where we put timetables on bus stops, because obviously they're not always at wheelchair height. Can anyone answer those questions?
So there is a project ongoing at the moment to look at Lawrence Hill Station as part of CRSTS to make it step-free. There are some challenges around how you get the accesses down to the platforms, but there is a funding allocation for that station within CRSTS 1. Parsons Street will be high up the list on the next round of funding when we look at that. So what was the question on bus stops?
It was moving the timetables lower to make them more wheelchair accessible.
I can certainly put that to the team. Yeah, I'll ask them what the position is on that.
And in fact, I was sitting next to Paul Baker in the Disability Advisory Group just earlier on this week, and he was talking about that, something that he wanted to do because they tend to come at a standard height, and we do need to review that. Patsy, you wanted to come in.
Apologies, Chair. I do have to clarify my previous comment, and we do not charge for parking. I've just checked on the website. Apologies.
That's great, thank you. That's good to know as well. Rob?
I'm going to ask another question that I think you might be able to answer, which is about the pavement parking letter that is mentioned in item 6. Because obviously we want to take action on pavement parking, not least through the task and finish group on curbside and parking. This is happening quite soon, isn't it? That we're sending that, or has it been sent already? The question is, when's the pavement parking letter going to the DFT?
So I think today that's landed in the committee's inboxes for comment, and maybe we should set ourselves a deadline of maybe a week from now for any comments so that we can get that off as soon as possible. Okay, thank you. Is there Rob?
Sorry, and this is the point that I want to make. which is around disabled parking space provision that is mentioned here. I don't remember this coming to task and finish groups explicitly yet for curbside and parking, but I think it would be covered by the work we're doing on Kirby, which would just basically an assessment of all of the streets in Bristol in terms of their curbside, their properties, and how they're used. And I think that could be something that could be looked at through that. That is all I wanted to say.
Thanks, and I think we are going to have to sort of make sure that we contain the agenda of that task and finish group, because it's getting pretty. It could spiral outwards. So that's good. Shall we move ourselves on, if that's okay? Any other questions or comments? No. So the next one is item 8. So sorry, I meant the committee. So my recommendation is that the committee, or the recommendation in the report is the committee approves the offered response outlined and notes it. So I think we'll do that. Shall we move on to agenda item 8, linear parking? So this report, the purpose of the report is to seek approval for the revised proposal to implement linear parking charges in the central controlled parking zone and some off-street car parks, to note a number of associated items connected with the implementation of linear parking, and to seek approval to delegate authority to implement linear parking to the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration. This is a key decision because it involves over £500,000 worth of budget, and I'm going to invite Sean to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm sure most of the committee will be aware we brought the report back in September, where it was deferred and to take to the task and finish group, and also engaged with the nighttime economy. The report shows that is exactly what we've done. We've engaged with the nighttime economy and we've brought it back to the task and finish group as well. We've obviously fleshed out the report a lot more. You will see that there's a lot more information in there, tables and so on. And we've revised the proposals from the last report to try and address some of the concerns which were raised through that debate previously.
That's a lovely, succinct and brief, thank you. David.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to draw attention to paragraph 19 of your report, Sean, where you discuss about mitigation on the impact of changes to the night economy workers, particularly talking about night bus services. I am proud to report that the Task and Finish group about bus services actually is now considering funding night bus services. So we will be hopefully having some changes on that. It'd be really positive for us. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So this committee agreed that the issue of linear parking would be referred to the Parking Task and Finish group back in September, I think it was. This paper was brought to them at very short notice, from what I understand, and I don't believe members had a proper chance to consider it then as part of a holistic approach to a parking strategy. I attended the consultation event with you, Ed, with representatives of the nighttime economy, and there were more council officers and councillors present than there were representatives of the nighttime economy. But they made it clear that proposals to significantly increase charges after 6 p.m. would have a detrimental impact on employees working in Bristol's nighttime economy, and they didn't support the proposals. So although these proposals have been modified the charges, they will still represent a significant additional cost to nighttime economy workers as far as we can see. As David mentioned, bus Task and Finish groups currently looking at whether we can make improvements to night bus services from September. And I would suggest that until we know the outcome of those efforts and whether there will be a better nighttime bus service for nighttime workers from September, these proposals are premature and we won't be supporting them at this time.
That's disappointing, Tim, because I thought we had a very robust discussion with the nighttime economy people. There was people there representing multiple venues. So we did have Barbie and we did have the bid in present. So I think they were there to speak on behalf of a number of people.
And they did speak, but they weren't in favour.
I think we've... Sorry?
They did speak, but they weren't in favour of our proposals.
I think we did run through a number of proposals, and we've significantly modified them in relation to the feedback that they gave us. I don't know if anyone wants to make any comments as officers, but as far as I'm concerned, we've done quite a good job of actually listening to the concerns and directly responding to them. Kaz, then Emma.
Yeah, so where am I sitting with this one at the moment? You know, it's heading in the right direction. Somebody coming to watch a show at the Hippodrome who's doing a 6 p.m. or somebody who's working doing a 6 p.m. to 12 a.m. shift in a bar will pay £6.80 instead of £10.80 according to your original proposals. So it's going the right way. But you know, this compares to £6.50 for a bus ticket or £4.80 for somebody who uses 2 singles on the bus. But here's the thing, there's very limited bus service late in the evening in terms of routes and departure times from the centre. And yes, we did discuss this at the Curbside and Parking Strategy Group, but we had 2 hours notice. And you say in the paper that Bristol Knights, page 41, section 2A, Bristol Knights state, the availability, frequency, reliability and safety of public transport are a key issue for as many bus services finish too early. And that's why I brought a motion on safe travel home for nighttime economy workers to council. The Labour group brought a constructive amendment to Budget Council to spend up to £0.45 million of reserve on new night bus routes to operate between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m, supporting the Bristol nighttime economy, and that was voted down by the Green Party in that meeting. So I kind of am with Tim on this one.
Emma.
I mean, as you know, I share some of those concerns. I think we, you know, you're saying we're going in the right direction. I think that's more of a positive thing. I think it's good that we're going in the right direction, while making, you know, those mitigations for those who can't change modal shift at the moment. You know, we talk a lot about how we do things not only for to improve things, but because we are trying to get people to change their habits, change their behaviours, and that is more difficult at the moment at night. But I think if we just pause everything and wait until we've got all the night buses, it's still not going to change anything. There are always going to be people who it's going to be difficult to change their habits. You know, people are, I think I mentioned at the last Transport Committee actually that 45% of people said they wouldn't take a night bus if there was one, you know, because they don't feel safe, because they always want door-to-door transport. I think what we could be doing alongside this, you know, I think as you say, this is a step in the right direction. We could be looking at minibus services. We could work with Barbie and the bid and see if there's, you know, anything we can do there. So I don't think we can just put this off until everything's perfect in the nighttime economy. But I think we can acknowledge that that this isn't all about modal shift. We are also taking into account those people who, you know, they are going to drive because it is their safest, easiest way to get home from work.
So rather late in the day today, we've officers have sent the committee again a response around the letter that we're going to be we agreed to send to WECA and the Police and Crime Commissioner. In that, it has 2 suggestions amongst other things, which is specifically to extend the DOT contract so it's 24 hours, so that people can get much more close to their front door, as it were, rather than a bus. And the second thing is to ask them to look at the Westlink, both the sort of algorithms and the vehicles, to see if we couldn't get some sort of shared lifts home using the Westlink capabilities. So I think you're right. We can't do everything at once, but we're moving in the right direction.
It's got to be part of a holistic approach. There is not one single thing. You know, I would love to say it's just about night buses, and don't get me wrong, night buses will help. We love night buses, but they're not a silver bullet. We've got to look at all those different options, including those who will always need door-to-door transport. Thank you.
Dawn.
Thanks. I think it's some of the language about people changing their habits when you're referring to people, women often trying to get home late at night from their rather poorly paid work. That's quite unhelpful. I don't have a problem in a sense with what's before us here. I think we're on the right track. But I think the big win will be to create that linkage between sufficient provision of night buses for people and the costs of parking in the evening for people who choose to take their car and want to go and enjoy the entertainments provided by poorly paid, often very poorly paid workers who then need to get home safely. I think if we can create that linkage in people's minds, then we'll have set a foundation for really a degree of consensus over how we set parking charges. And so really look forward to the night bus and the Task and Finish Group's work, producing its results, and us being much more supportive of this approach.
I'm rather surprised that we're trying to mitigate the effect of car parking charges, and when we've looked in the Supported Bus Services Group at the cost of running night buses, I think if you're trying to link those two things directly, you're going to see a massive hike in car parking charges. So I'm quite surprised by that, and I think we need to take small steps, not some sort of huge, great big leap. That's my personal opinion.
Well, it's a step towards any night buses that we haven't seen yet. So we haven't seen a small step towards night buses. We have seen a discussion of people changing their habits when those people who do not have the capacity to change their habits because of their work. And that is the problematic approach to this, isn't it?
Which is exactly why, as Kaz pointed out, the hike in the prices is actually is a lot smaller than the hike was going to be. In fact, I can't work out the percentage, but the percentage is going to be a fraction of what we were proposing. Patsy wants to come in.
So just to address a few of the concerns that's been raised, I absolutely agree that there needs to be a holistic, parallel piece of work that helps the nighttime economy workers. However, this came in September. We have spent 6 months revising, working with the nighttime economy, working with members' concerns. I appreciate the Task and Finish group was short notice. However, I understand it was the only item. It was discussed at length. All of those concerns have been taken back by the officers, reworked. I will remind officers that it has been delayed by 6 months. And if I refer to the professional comments, if we do not approve this today, it is the committee's responsibility to identify alternative funding, because it will create a £500,000 hole in the budget this year. So while I appreciate it, we went as far as we can to address all the concerns raised. But however, we must remember the significant amount of people who are parking in the city centre at night are people attending shows, restaurants and events throughout the city, not nighttime economy workers. So there is a marginal part, an important part, but a marginal part of those people who are parking, and we have tried to address that as far as we can. This paper has been worked on in entirety for over 9 months and amended. I think Ed Chair probably knows it word by word, off by heart, as do the officers, and it has been, revised extensively to address all of the concerns that have been raised.
Tim, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, thanks. I think two things. One is I do think there is a belief within our group that this is being driven by finances and not by the need to solve the problem about people who complain that they pay for parking at 5 o'clock and have to incur the late night charge. And just to remind everybody that we did, as a Labour group, put in an amendment to the budget that would have negated the need to raise this money. So I don't think we're being inconsistent by opposing this now. We did try and sort that out at the budget, but it was not accepted. The other thing, I totally accept what Emma's saying about more options. I think that's absolutely true. But the one option that I think is within our grasp and could be delivered within 6 months is the improvements we're talking about with buses. We don't know exactly what we're going to get, but we're hopeful that we can get there. And I do think that asking people to make modal changes when there is no alternative is just it's a a non-starter. It doesn't make sense.
I think what we're asking to do is people to pay a very modest amount, which probably, if you look at the inflation over the years, is very much in line with inflation. A very modest amount extra to park for 4 hours in the evening. I don't know if there's any other comments or questions, but I'm beginning to... Mark.
Thank you, Chair. I realise the danger here that I'm a Johnny-come-lately, because I'm subbing into this, and obviously months of work has gone on with it. Personally, I think an increase from, was it £4.50 an hour to £5.10 an hour, if I'm reading the things right. Again, everyone else has the benefit of knowledge. I have the curse of the lack of it. That isn't unreasonable considering inflation, from my opinion. I take entirely what's said about nighttime economy workers. My personal preference, I have to say, would have been option 2. I think keep the reduction. If we're going to have a debate about we want to move in parallel, we could agree option 2, which puts it exactly what you want, and then debate whether to bring in the reduction at another point. But that would at least get it through this year, because otherwise, as has been mentioned, we are going to have to find the money from somewhere, and I don't see an amendment on where that money comes from.
Can I just make an important point that this will not be implemented immediately because of the delays? We haven't done the TRO process, so we're already way behind.
6 months already then.
6 to 9 months it'll take us to get this implemented, so we're already playing catch up.
So I'm going to move this recommendation 1. So somewhere it tells me what to say. So I'm going to, so I'm going to move recommendation 1, which is that subject to substitution, we do what is option 1 as described in point 26. Do I have a seconder? David, thank you. Would anyone like to speak about this any further? Would anyone like to move a motion to an amendment to possibly option 2?
I have a feeling I'll be a lonely voice. I would prefer option 2, and I would move that one.
Would anyone like to second option 2? That one falls, so we're back to whether or not we approve of option 1. So everyone in favour of that, please raise your hands. So that's 5. That's Nick, David, Emma and Rob and Ed. Anyone against? That's Kaz, Tim and Don. And abstaining? Mark is abstaining. Thank you. So we are... so the recommendation of this... what am I saying now? Just remind me. So we approved the revised linear parking proposal on the basis of option 1 as described in point 26. We note the comments in point 28 and we delegate the authority to the Executive Director Growth and Regeneration in consultation with the Chair of the Transport and Connectivity Committee to implement the approved proposals, obviously subject to statutory consultation. Right, should we move on, please? So the next one is agenda item 9, which is to seek approval for the submission of a full business case to the West of England Combined Authority for the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement Funding, and subject to approval to accept and invest the funding to deliver the A374018 Workpackage 3 improvements, also known as College Green, Park Street and Triangle and Queen's Road. Also to seek approval and accept and invest an increased level of funding to deliver the A4018 Corridor Improvement Project. This is a key decision report as it's a decision involving over 500,000 and impacting 2 or more wards. This report has exempt information at Appendix E. If any member feels they need to discuss the information, please indicate so we can go into exempt session. This item was originally on the forward plan as open and subsequently changed to a part exempt after completing the APR 15 process to update the information published. I'm going to invite Adam to introduce and outline the report, and then we'll go into comments and questions.
Thanks. So, yeah, this is seeking approval to submit the full business case to the Combined Authority for the Triangle Park Street scheme, which is Workpackage 3 of the A37A418 scheme. And then also to seek approval to accept and invest that funding to deliver the scheme. Just a quick overview of what the scheme is. Hopefully you've all read the papers, I'm sure you have. The main elements are the closure of Park Street to through traffic, significant changes around the triangle to provide enhanced segregated cycling provision and enhanced public realm, improvements for pedestrian routes across the area. One element is already been approved, which is the junction at the bottom end, the Cannons Road junction. That's been approved as a standalone scheme, and it would be enhanced as part of this scheme. Some of the key benefits, there's obviously a significant amount of benefit to walking and cycling modes, but also in terms of buses, seeing a 60% or forecasting a 60% reduction in journey time for southbound buses and a 33% reduction in journey time for northbound buses, which is very significant. And I think also to kind of highlight the differential that is being created between making a journey from White Ladies Road into the city centre by bus compared to making that by car is really key in terms of promoting buses, ensuring that they are reliable. So it's a really key scheme for buses, also a really key scheme for connecting a lot of our walking and cycling network as well. The paper sets out the benefits. There's a lot in there about the modelling and how it will all work. Obviously, it is a significant change. I won't go through everything in huge amounts of detail, but there is a lot in there in terms of the wider benefits, in terms of gross value added, other kind of property benefits, and estimating those to be around 182 to 200 million. The transport benefits themselves estimate around £6 to £7 of benefit for every pound invested. It's quite often a struggle to get to £2 benefit for every pound invested, so £6 to £7 is really significant benefits from the scheme. So I will leave it there because I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions. And the recommendation, as I say, is to approve the full business case and then authorise us to take all the steps necessary to deliver the scheme.
Would anyone like to ask any questions before we go into the debate? So Nick, then Rob, then Don. Oh, it wasn't a question. So anyone got any question? Rob?
Yeah, I've got one question before I make comments. It mentions that the projected reduction in parking income works out as £381,589 per annum. I just wonder whether the consideration has been made for how that shortfall is plugged. It's not a huge sum of money in the grand scheme of things, but just interested to know whether that's been thought about.
So yeah, so that sum is the figure of essentially what is generated at the moment by those spaces. So there may be some additional income generated from those car parking trips moving to other car parks, so off-street car parks, for example. We're undertaking a couple of pieces of work at the moment around the investment fund, but also the general impact of active travel schemes on parking income to look at those issues and how they are then managed across transport as a whole. So looking at all the potential income that comes in aside from parking. So, where there's bus gates, for example, if people drive through those bus gates and pay a fine, that can offset the loss of parking income, as an example. So it's to set out that there is that impact. We're looking at how that is mitigated across the whole programme because all the schemes are having different impacts on parking income and other income that will come in from different parts of the network.
Don, was it a question?
It was a question, yeah. It's one for Sean, actually. Just to ask whether the remedy for the drainage problems at the bottom of White Ladies Road will be, can we bring that solution into this without too much problem, or are they running on separate tracks at the moment?
The question was, we've got a project to improve the drainage on the bottom of White Ladies Road.
By the BBC.
Are we going to try and coordinate the two projects?
Yeah.
Sorry, Don. Yeah, I'm sorry, caught up now. Yes, the drainage scheme for at the bottom of White Ladies Road is actually imminent to go out to tender and would be implemented hopefully within the next few months, with it due to its completion before the Queen's Road scheme actually starts on site. So we are coordinating both the projects to deliver both.
And I think I've been assured that the two designs complement one another. They're not right-hand, left-hand.
It'd be even better, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So I think I've seen hands now from David and Tim and Kaz. Are these all questions? Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question about University Road and the proposed changes there. Looking at the graphics that are supplied, it does look quite tight for cyclists to be mixing with pedestrians on either side. I'm just wondering if we can make the planters a bit smaller and give a bit more width for proper shared space along that road, please.
I certainly take that back to the team and check with them the position and what the widths are. I haven't measured the exact widths, so they're visuals. I'll check with them exactly where we are with that, but yeah, we can certainly look at that.
We have agreed not to try and design things by committee, but I think this is something that isn't going to impact quite as heavily as things like realigning drainage and curbs and so on. And I also note that there was a public statement on this as well, so thanks for that. Sorry, I've forgotten who was next. Was it Tim, then Kaz?
Two questions. There's the benefit cost ratio, started off at 6.4, ended up at 7. I guess that's for the whole scheme. What are the sort of main contributors of that? We've got the schemes in 3 different parts, north, central and south, I think is sort of Park Street bit. My second question is that we seem to have a lot of work starting in autumn this year across the city potentially. Are you concerned about all this work being done at the same time?
Yes, I'm just scrolling through the paper. The benefits are, the main benefits are walking and cycling benefits and public transport benefits. I was just trying to find the table that sets it all out in detail. So the bus user benefits are a big chunk, and then the active travel benefits are another big chunk of those transport benefits. The benefits I talked about at the start are kind of wider economic benefits as well in terms of land values and urban realm improvements. The increase from 6.4 to 7 is based on the improvement in the urban realm as well as the transport benefits that relate to walking, cycling, buses, etc.
Okay, so my question is actually, the different parts of the scheme, like the public realm and the bit around the top. Then you've got the Park Street bit down towards the bottom. Do they also contribute equal amounts to this benefit cost ratio, or is one bit more important than another bit?
So they'll be contributing in slightly different ways. The model is looking at the whole impact of the scheme. The bus benefits are largely generated by the Park Street changes. So the bus gate at the bottom in particular is very beneficial to buses. The walking and cycling benefits will largely be generated by the works around the triangle. That's where the majority of the segregated provision and the new urban realm space is. And the second part of the question, sorry.
Second question was about all the work going on at the same time.
Yeah.
Have you any concerns?
Yes, we recognise that challenge. It's a challenge we've had before when we did Greater Bristol Bus Network, when we did Metro Bus. Lots of bits of the city getting dug up at the same time. It tends to happen with the way funding is provided by the DfT, that it has specific funding windows, and therefore the work tends to build up towards the end of it. We're putting in place a number of measures to try and manage the impact. So we are employing new roles in things like construction managers. We've got extra resource in network management as well. We'll be looking at the plans for all of the different projects to ensure they coordinate as far as possible. In some cases, there's an opportunity, if you like. If you create congestion here, you may as well do the bit next to it because you've reduced the traffic volumes anyway. But yes, we are looking at how we coordinate that, and also working with the combined authority to coordinate it on a regional basis. There are various projects going on to look at how we mitigate the impacts as well. So we've been doing a piece of work to look at how you mitigate the wider impacts of the traffic works, but also all the development work that's happening in the city centre in terms of impact on retail and the kind of successfulness of the city centre as well. So one final thing I'd say is that we are pushing for the combined authority to look at how they can provide incentives for people to use public transport as well, so that the best way to avoid congestion is to have people using other modes when the works are going on. So we're talking to them about how they might fund elements of public transport usage to make that more attractive to people, particularly around park and rides.
And I've also been asking the combined authority to look at possibly look at funding for additional buses that could be redeployed when we know there's going to be impact on the network, and for the people arranging the traffic management around the works to see if the buses can be put to the front of any queue that results from the works. I think it's also worth mentioning that last time we met, we looked at the corporate risk register, and I expressed some surprise that the fact that we were doing so many schemes at once through CRSTS was not on there. And it's because it's been carefully analysed and it doesn't actually hit the threshold for the corporate risk register at the moment because of all the mitigation work that's happening. I'm still quite amazed that we've managed to keep that off the corporate risk register, but it is something that I think I've mentioned at every single time. Every single one of these committees, we've pushed some sort of CRSTS thing through, and every time I've expressed concern about this, the officers and WECA are well aware of my concerns, and so I think that's the other part of the answer from me as the chair. Tim, did you want to ask your questions? And then,
yeah.
Hopefully, are there any more questions? I just want to sort of manage our time. I know you want to make a statement or you want to make some comments, but can we do Tim, then Nick? And Nick, then you can spill into whatever it is you want to say after.
Yeah, and just to say as well, Ed, that I've raised it regularly with WECA when they've brought CRSTS papers to WECA audit, so we're all banging that drum as hard as we can, but the proof will be in the pudding, as they say. Yeah, so the consultation on this was quite a long time ago, 2021, I think, and the consultation results, the Queen's Road part had 62% in favour, Triangle 52, College Green 52, but Park Street had 45, so that's clearly the element that people were most worried about in the consultation. And I note that Bristol University, Bristol taxi drivers and the BID members all asked for further meetings and discussions on what could be done to improve the plan. So my question is really what changes have been made to address the concerns regarding the Park Street element of the plan since that consultation was carried out?
Right, so we did re-engage with key stakeholders following that, because obviously that consultation was a while ago. So when we had the decision to move ahead with the scheme, we re-engaged with stakeholders. Would have been last year, to get their views and to get their inputs. In terms of the changes that have been made, I don't have those right to hand at the moment.
I'll just pop in there that we actually put a lot of effort in the last few months into producing a report which clearly demonstrates what we've changed, so what people said and how we've responded to that. I think there was 6 or 7 pages of changes that we were very clear about in the pamphlet. I think it was actually part of the paperwork for this, or certainly it's been widely available. I personally have met with some of the biggest people like the Hippodrome and St George's and the BID, and they were quite reassured that we've actually taken on board their concerns and dealt with them. And next week I'll be meeting some of the smaller traders with the BID in order to listen to their concerns as well. So I think we have done a really quite a thorough process of outlining exactly what the changes we've made, and certainly some of the biggest venues were actually, I think, quite pleased or quite satisfied at least that we'd listened and accepted what their concerns. I was actually quite impressed by the officers that there's been a really thorough process and all that they were able to do with all the questions from those larger venues.
Yeah, and to be honest, I just thought it would be good to air some of those at a public committee and say what we have done to address those concerns. In terms of the paperwork, I think everybody knows that the paperwork for this committee is interminable in terms of trying to find the things that you're looking for. And I've been emailing people back and forwards to find different things and had answers to different questions, but that one I didn't find. So I'm sure it is in there somewhere, but it would have been useful if we could just list a few of them in the public forum so that people would know. But if we haven't got them to hand, then we haven't got them to hand.
Sorry, it's Appendix A2, which shows the changes that have been made.
Which is part of the main pack, isn't it?
Yeah, it's part of the main pack. So if you just after the main report, So some of the elements is adding an inbound bus lane from White Ladies Road that continues onto Queens Road Triangle bus stops, an island to the zebra crossing and a bus shelter to the bus stop on Queen's Avenue, 2 passing places on Richmond Hill, removing build-outs at Richmond Hill, more detail to the public space on Queen's Road, etc. So it's just after the main.
Are there any of those relate specifically to Park Street and, you know, the concerns that people had about Park Street, which was the main issue?
Okay. Yeah, so the changes to Park Street, adding cycle and e-scooter parking lay-bys, a build-out at the St George's Road junction, making Great George Street one-way into Hill Street, making Charlotte Street one-way out to Hill Street, adding more detail to the parklets on the junctions around Charlotte Street and Great George Street, and relocating a car club parking bay on Charlotte Street. That's the changes to Park Street.
And Ed, you've had positive feedback as well as
I sat with some of the larger venues, like I said. They ask a number of questions and seem really quite satisfied. And actually, they were starting to talk about how they might start to try and activate some of the new public spaces as a triumvirate of Victoria Rooms, Royal West Academy, and the St George's. All of them are talking about some kind of arts festival, and they feel that actually there's spaces there that they can use now in a much more progressive way, rather than having a great big racetrack around in front of the beautiful statues and architecture of the Victoria Rooms. And last week I met George Ferguson, who's chair of one of those organisations, and is working to look at how we activate those spaces and bring maybe some public art into those spaces as well.
Thanks. I'm sure Nick's going to talk about.
Noticed that the public petition has now got something like 300 signatures, so it doesn't seem to be maybe not meeting the threshold, certainly not for a full council debate as things stand, and it's been up for a number of weeks now. Nick, you've been waiting incredibly patiently. I want to move to you now, because I know you've been doing a lot of detailed work looking at some of the numbers.
Yes, I rather cheated the system by asking officers over the last couple of weeks of the details of this scheme. So,
Nick, I don't want you to describe that as cheating the system. I want you to describe that as doing your due diligence and being. We're very glad that you've been looking at this level of detail.
Thank you. Well, that's very, very kind. And I'd like to thank the officers as well for their time in explaining it to me over several hours, going through the plans in detail and the traffic modelling. You may know that one of my former jobs was Regional Planning Advisor for National Highways, so I do get into the detail of this. The BCR, as Councillor Self asked for, is actually set out in Table 2.4, page 75 of Appendix O. And that's actually quite interesting, because we do need to consider the costs versus the benefits for a scheme like this. And this tells us that the net benefit of the scheme is set out as 48 million, and 28 million of that, so 60%, comes from pedestrian and cycling improvements on Queen's Road. So that's... Okay, so yeah, the vast majority of the benefit of the scheme actually comes from additional pedestrianisation on Queen's Road. Nothing to do with Park Street. Looking at this, there is no benefit marked for pedestrians or cycling enhancement on Park Street. So the bus benefits are a small part of the BCR of this scheme, which is strange, because the closure of Park Street to through traffic is the most controversial element. As Councillor Rippington has pointed out, this is what we've been hearing about from our residents, that this is the unpopular bit, and yet it's not really driving the benefits of the scheme. So while the scheme is being promoted as a bus pedestrian cycling scheme, because it gates a road which is currently open for general traffic, I think we should consider it as a highways scheme and look at what the impacts are on displaced vehicles. Now, we'd like to imagine that there will be mode share, but we do have modelling here from our officers that says that while maybe 1/3 of mode will switch to public transport, the majority of it will just be displaced onto neighbouring roads. So this is all in Appendix O, if you're following. So we're forecast 300 extra vehicles per hour on Park Street. That's the one that goes past the hospital. And in the PMP... Park Row, thank you. That's why I gave you locations. Good. Yes, Park Street, 99% fewer vehicles, so that's definitely a win there. Park Row, it's 123% extra at the PM peak, so more than double is the forecast. And whether you walk, cycle or drive down that road, we know that it's quite congested now, so we should ask ourselves, can it handle being twice as bad, having twice the number of vehicles going through it? What would happen to the air quality in that location? So the target for safe air is 40 micrograms per cubic metre, and in that area outside the BRI we're currently at 28. That's an improvement on 2 years ago where it was right at the legal limit, but if we were to double the number of vehicles going through there, would that be a problem for air quality? Would it lead us to exceed those limits again in this air quality management area? We should also ask ourselves about ambulances. If they get stuck in, will they get stuck in congestion if traffic has doubled, given the work that is going on right now to narrow that road? The other place where traffic would get moved on to is Anchor Road. Again, this is forecast in Appendix O as an extra 300 cars per hour. This road is already at the 40 micrograms per cubic metre level for nitrous oxides, and so increasing the number of vehicles there might well cause us to trip back into making the air quality in this AQMA worse. And this is something that we should be very aware of as a committee, as knowingly or indeed unknowingly causing an AQMA to fall out of compliance would be something that would be heavily at risk of in terms of a judicial review. So I think those are costs of the schemes that have not really been calculated in the BCR. Looking at the other half on the benefits, so I don't have a car, I cycle to this building very frequently, and I ask myself, would this scheme help me cycle from one end of Queen's Road down Park Street? And actually it wouldn't. The discontinuities in that cycle path in 3 different locations means that on all 3 of those occasions, I would have to do something illegal, unsafe, or get off the bike and push it round a corner. So that's the kind of thing that needs to be worked up on the schemes. I would expect a consistent cycle route for the cost of £15 million going from one end to the other. And so, reluctantly, I'm concluding if all of the benefits, well, the majority of the benefits are in the pedestrianisation around Queen's Road, and we're not getting benefits from closing Park Street, that does give us significant disbenefits from displaced traffic. I don't think that this scheme is worth pursuing.
Emma and then Mark.
Thank you. I do really like the scheme. I'm going to say I especially like the improvement in the space around the Vic rooms. I think I've often thought it's so trafficky and polluted around there right now, and there's a lot of students, and a lot of students are walking around on foot, and having that realm opened up, I think it's just going to be absolutely beautiful. And I think a focus on the bus route is important. We often hear that one of the challenges to modal shift of moving away from cars is that the bus routes aren't good enough, the buses don't go where I want to go, the buses aren't fast enough, there aren't enough buses. This is what this is doing. This is why these transport corridors are so important. So I definitely see the benefits there. However, I do share the concern about Park Row. I did check the EQIA, and where the EQIA covers the scheme itself, it doesn't cover Park Row and to the BRI. I think that would be, if we could get that put into the EQI before it goes to full business case or part of the full business case, I think that would reassure people, because again it's another thing, like I said before, there are times where you will do modal shift, if you've got a chronic illness, if you're on your way to hospital, you might not, that's not the time you're going to change the way you get somewhere. And it's just interesting to see what that impact would be and if it can be mitigated. So love the scheme, very happy with it, but I think just that extension into the to include the hospital in the EQIA would be good to reassure people.
Yeah, I mean the EQIA is a living, evolving document, so we will certainly add that in. In terms of the flows and along Park Row, The flows are dependent on a lot of things. So, and one of the key factors is the capacity that you get at the James Barton roundabout. So what the modelling shows is that there's less traffic going through Lewins Mead, which is the alternative route. Therefore, that creates capacity at the James Barton, which that route then fills in. Also, the Park Row scheme has closed Colston Street, which was a kind of fairly busy route from Jacob Wells roundabout through to Park Row, so that's reduced traffic there as well. So these the kind of the modelling drawings can be a bit difficult to understand at times when things are going up and down. The air quality is a factor of a variety of things. It's topography, the speed of vehicles, how many vehicles as well, and the cleanness of the vehicles. So in general, the vehicles are getting cleaner because engines are getting cleaner as people upgrade their vehicles. We also have a significant number of electric buses coming into the fleet, which we got Zebra funding from the government, which first are matching to electrify their fleet, which will make a really significant difference as well. So air quality will be improving over time either way. But yeah, certainly we can look at the EQIA and add in the accessibility to the BRI and the impacts of any changes in traffic flows to that.
So can we just note that as an action, please, that we're going to, the officers will take away the EQIA and include Park Row in that. And I just want to understand that again, that what you're saying effectively is that quite a lot of the vehicles that used to have travelled down Park Street and then head towards St James Barton will no longer be doing that, so that there'll be more capacity, so that although there'll be more vehicles on Park Row, they'll actually be able to move faster because there's less of a delay at St James Barton.
Yeah, so the capacity of any road is determined by the junction that has the least capacity on that route, and that will be the James Barton for the inbound movement. So, it's very slow going from the Triangle to St Michael's Hill at the moment because there are 3 different movements converging. One of those is already going, and then they won't be blocking back from ahead. So the flow will improve, and the traffic is kind of moving from here to here, if you like.
I think I saw somebody else with their hand up. Was it Mark? Yes.
Obviously, this will be a shock to no one that I'm sceptical, and actually I share a lot of earlier comments from Councillor Coombs there. I'm sort of having a bit of lived experience with what happens when we start to play around with roads, with the A418 and all the rest of the roadworks, which I know you're coming to your May meeting, my petition. You'll look forward to it, Chair. But what we're seeing there is quite obvious. Traffic, it flows like water. Once you start stopping it up, it then moves into all other random directions. So we've got knock-on effects on roads that were never even envisaged by planners. Residents did. We knew what would happen, and it is happening now. And we're having all manner of issues across my ward, and that's before the bus lane even goes in. That's just the roadworks. So I get that. And read the statistics on what would happen on Park Row, the deflected traffic. We are creating a problem. We're not solving it. We're just moving it. And then deluding ourselves into thinking that somehow we've created a silver bullet that's going to fix everything. There are good elements to this scheme. There really are. But the Park Street bit of it is not good at all. I can't support the scheme that blocks it off. We need to have a resilient road network where traffic can flow, not constantly keep limiting the roads that are available for use. So I'm afraid, Chair, I can't support this scheme tonight. I will be voting against it.
Thank you, Mark. Rob.
Thanks, Mark, for setting me up there. That's great. So water and traffic are not the same thing. Traffic doesn't work like water. Roads aren't pipes. Okay? If you block a pipe, obviously the water will go a different way because of physics, right? If you block traffic, that isn't the way that it works because it engages people's travel behaviour. It engages their minds. Oh, that's not available anymore. Oh, I'll think about how I get around differently. That's just generally how traffic works. You need to understand this because it's a fundamental transport planning principle.
Rob, don't talk down to me. We're living it in my ward.
But the thing is that we're talking about a scheme in the city centre. We're talking about a scheme that in a highly sustainable location. It's not out where you are. It's not the same as your ward. You have to understand that the city centre is a different area to your area, and I'm sure you do recognise that. All I would say is read some literature around this. You know, there's been lots of literature that shows that if you restrict through traffic, traffic just evaporates. It's part of the understanding of transport planning that everyone understands if you've done a little bit of research into it. I do appreciate I am talking down to you, but you've said this so many times that I have to bring it up here because you've said it so many times. Sorry?
Is the traffic model we've been presented with wrong?
No, but the actual way that you think about these things isn't based just around the modelling. It's also based around how people behave. They behave differently if you change the priorities of a street. It's just as simple as that, and you have to get your head around that a bit more.
I've got one more hand now from Kaz. Kaz. Kaz.
Well, I do like to see the evidence and it to be based on technical data. And it's been said there's a technical report. And when I looked into that, it was really quite pleasing to me to see that it's a validated model. And it gives me a lot of confidence that the numbers going down Park Row that have been presented are probably going to be quite accurate. And as Councillor Coombs said, I made the same sort of notes as you. 309 extra vehicles PM peak, 239 extra vehicles AM peak. That's data that I'm tended to believe. I do want to say there are lots of positive things in this scheme I really like, and I want to put out there, up the Victoria rooms, or the urban realm, the little side streets, excellent stuff. But I just want to echo the comments been made in terms of Park Street, and that's where I have some reservations about this. And also, I know you've mentioned yourself, Ed, about the 439 jobs, 469 jobs, but looking at the case study, that seemed a little bit iffy to me, and I'm not sure that the Park Street scheme and the case study that's mentioned, Sackville Street in London, are quite the same thing, so I'm quite dubious about those jobs. But yeah, I do like parts of this scheme.
I'm going to move that this committee approves the submission of a full business case to the West of England Mayoral Combined Authority and authorises the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration in consultation with the Chair of this committee and Section 151 Officer to take all the steps necessary, procure the contracts, extend the value of the existing highways and works framework if need be, and award contracts and invest the funding, and improve an increase in the budget envelope for the A401 corridor improvements project from 4.38 to 6.05 million pounds. Do I have a seconder? Emma. So, in favour, please, could you raise your hand in favour of this? That's 4. Against? 2. And abstaining? 3. So that's carried 4, 2 against and 3 abstaining. Thank you. I propose that we have a short break now. Yeah. So should we say back at 5 to?
Chair. Just passing out the biscuits.
I think they're very welcome, the biscuits, so thank you, Councillor West and Mark, in fact. So, agenda item 10, City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement Maintenance and Integrated Transport Buck Allocation for 25-26 and 26-27. The purpose of the report is to approve the proposed maintenance and integrated transport block funding allocation from WECA as part of CRSTS, 1 million internal funding, 0.56 million Transforming Cities Fund and 0.2362 million for pothole funding, and to delegate the authority to deliver maintenance and ITB projects as necessary, including any underspend. I've got it here that both Adam and Sean are going to introduce this, so I don't know who's going first or if you've choreographed this at all.
Yeah, I assumed I was introducing it, but then Sean can comment on the maintenance elements. So this is the annual allocation that we get from the DFT that comes via combined authority. With the advent of CRSTS, this was all rolled into the CRSTS programme, but it is essentially a separate block of money that is incorporated into CRSTS. So we are seeking to approve the ITB, which is the Integrated Transport Block funding allocation, and that includes the maintenance transport block, including also £1 million of internal funding, 560,000 of Transforming Cities funding, and 2.36 million of funding allocated for potholes. And then to delegate the authority to deliver the maintenance and ITB projects as necessary, including any underspend from 24-25. These are ongoing kind of annual programmes, so if they don't spend all their funding in 1 year, we can roll funding forward. So the fundings are then set out in the table, which shows how much has been spent to date. We have a total of 43.86 to spend over 5 years. And this is setting out what the allocations are for the following year and indicative allocation for the final year as well of 26-27. Key points to discuss, it covers both of those 2 final years. There are various other funding pots that are being spent in these areas. So as an example, we have Clean Air Zone money that is going to be funding local transport schemes. So some of this money is allocated to local transport schemes, and there are obviously other maintenance pots that fund maintenance projects as well. So this is one element of the funding picture. We've set out 3 options. Our recommendation is to go with option 1. That sets out, if you look at the table just under option 1, that would be 944,000 of integrated transport block, which is for kind of local transport schemes, 7.9 million of maintenance, that's a total of 8.84 million, and then sets out the amounts for 26-27 as well. The ITB allocation over both years is for bus shelter replacements, local transport schemes, under-risk school streets, Park Road, etc. And the maintenance funding covers all the different maintenance elements, so structural carriageway repairs, carriageway surfacing, public rights of way, traffic signals, all of those maintenance elements. We did consider 2 other options, which were to put more funding into the integrated transport block side, which is option 2. That would reduce the maintenance allocation, and a third option then to increase the maintenance allocation and reduce the ITB allocation. Our view is option 1 is the best option in terms of providing a good balance between maintenance funding and local transport funding. So that's the option that we put forward for recommendation. So the recommendations there are to approve the indicative funding allocations for the 2 years, noting the funding allocations that I mentioned from maintenance, and then to authorise the exec director to take all steps to invest that funding. And within that, there is the opportunity also to make adjustments within those amounts up to £500,000. Sean, was there anything you wanted to add?
No, I think I covered maintenance quite well there. Just to say, obviously, as Adam says, this covers the large maintenance programme across the city, which is to tackle the depredation of the assets. So it's already incorporated into some of our ongoing programmes now, ready, which will come this summer. So I don't think there's much more, because it is covered in the report about all the different elements of maintenance. It covers in relation to surfacing, footway projects, drainage, street lighting. It's pretty much all the assets across get an element of funding, which has been assessed through the asset management system to understand where the pressures are.
Thank you, Adam and Sean. Would anyone like to ask any questions? So I've got Emma and Kaz.
Thank you. Yeah, this is great. Lots of things to be fixed. Always good news about potholes. One thing I didn't see on the list, and I don't know if it comes under this or if it's a separate budget, is repainting road markings, like white lines and things, and if that would be included, or is that yeah, I'm looking at you, Sean, because I thought you might know.
Yes, it's included within the resurfacing budget. DFT don't identify lining as an asset. It's classed as the highway, so it's actually identified under the highway budgets. There's also the capital budget, so refurbishment of lining is actually a revenue cost, so that's why that's not in here. So I have a revenue budget to reinstate lining, but lining on new surfacing, new roads which we've surface dressed or replaced is paid for through these budgets to replace the lining back onto those roads.
Great, thank you.
And I think recently we've upped the number of resources put into into lining and relining, haven't we?
Yeah, so there is 2 additional crews on the network, and from the previous agreed, I think it was cabinet decision for the CAS funding, there is additional maintenance funding which we've allocated £200,000 to actually increase the funding on reinstatement of lining across the city.
From CAS money, sorry.
From CAS funding, which has been agreed to be spent as additional maintenance. So there's £200,000 been set aside each year over the next 3 years to actually increase, because the budget for revenue is only 33,000. That's obviously a big increase to try and address the issues which have been highlighted by a number of councillors to me about the lining condition across the network, and we're trying to resolve.
And I was very grateful to Sean for putting in extra resources into this in the last few months, and I think we're going to see that really hitting the ground soon when the weather improves and we're able to do more, isn't that right, Sean?
Yeah, so obviously these months are challenging. I think experienced councillors will know we can't line in the winter, and there's grit causes us problems, and cold weather causes us in rain. So obviously as we come into the summer, I have been putting more pressure on contractors to make sure that we actually increase the crews even further. So as our surfacing programme hits, we're not taking the resources, which is doing now the maintenance work, into the resurfacing. We're actually putting more resources in to try and accelerate it across the board.
Because then it melts, because that happened in our one.
Thermoplastic shouldn't melt unless it gets really, really hot out there.
Kaz?
Yeah, I'm happy to go with the officer recommendation, option 1 on this. And it just shows that you do some really good work around the city, all these different things you put down there. So just wanted to say, well done. And but just maybe a couple of questions. The 2.362 million for pothole funding, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, this is new funding from the government, has to be spent in 25-26. Will we have the people to be able to do that pothole, to spend that pothole money?
So, yes, it will be spent in 25-26, and pothole is the sort of eye-catching title. What the actual detail behind the grant is, we can use it for preventative maintenance to try and prevent potholes from forming in the first place, and that's how we try to target the money, because that's the most cost-effective carbon and basically cheapest way to do it, and it gets the most benefit because I can resurface roads and stop potholes from happening cheaper than it is to go and keep replacing potholes. So we will target the potholes, but we will do it alongside trying to use a significant amount of that funding to prevent potholes from happening in the first place.
Sean, we had last week at Full Council a members' forum question about the length of the guarantee of the potholes, and we did mention at the beginning of the meeting that we've had an officer decision notice in the contract. Maybe you'd like to just say a couple of words about how some of our learning has been put into that contract and your optimism for the future?
Yeah, so as part of the officer decision notice, we're about to award the contract. I'm not sure it's public yet, so I don't think I can say who. But basically, we did do an exercise of lessons learnt from the old contract, and we put in some very robust KPIs around the new contract with contract monitoring already set up to make sure that they deliver. We can generally, it's a 12-month guarantee on potholes. We do have the asset system in place now, which highlights directly to officers if that is a return. So we can highlight that to the contractor. So it's very much not from information. It's very much about if it gets reported and it's in the same location, that actually flags through the asset system to the officers. So we can say, right, your reinstatement failed. Cost is down to you, not to the council. Because they got to put a 12-month guarantee on it. That's just one of the lessons learned we've had through with the new contract. So we are hoping and quite excited to get the new contract underway and realise some of these benefits of the monitoring and the new asset sort of systems and permitting we've put in, which has been put on the contractor to deliver.
Mark.
Sorry, a straightforward question. The school streets element of the ITB, how many interventions does that fund?
Sorry. So school streets, we would estimate around on average 50k per school. So that would look at doing three schools. We do have another budget that does school streets as well, which will do another couple of schools per year.
Okay. That's my only question. As a broad comment, I personally would like to see more money in the school streets element to it, but the problem is I can't see which line I'd like to move the money from, because everything is infinitely worthy and it all needs doing. So on that basis, I will go with option one. But if there is an opportunity to possibly increase the school streets interventions at another point, I do think it is worth looking at.
When I've challenged officers that maybe we could be doing more at pace, one of the things that I'm being very impressed by, actually, is that they're doing the real preparatory work, and we've had no school streets drop out. We are quite heavily dependent on volunteers to put out the cones and make these things work. And I would have liked a faster pace of rollout, but actually I think doing the spade work beforehand to make sure that we retain those school streets and keep them going for the long term, because quite often in school you have a big churn and there's one or two champions who, if they leave, suddenly everything starts falling apart. So I'm really convinced that actually doing it at a sensible pace means that actually it's an enduring investment. Tim.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think we're all happy with option one. I don't think anybody's going to vote for either more flooding or more potholes. It's I just wanted to ask about the 12 million funding gap that you mentioned in maintenance funding. Is that a funding gap between what you feel the city needs in order to bring it up to standard and what we currently have? And if we were to get it up to that standard, I presume it wouldn't be a recurring 12 million funding gap. Is that a kind of what needs to fill the pothole in that 12 million?
So firstly, it's not what I feel, it's actually what the data from the life cycle modelling is telling us. So this has been done independently, and it's what is actually informing that figure. That figure goes across all assets, so it's structures as well as roads, as well as footways, as well as drainage. That £12 million is required as a investment for 5 years sustainable on top of what's there at the moment to address the depreciation and create a steady state. Then it would actually drop to about 7 to 8 million a year from 5 years plus. But that would still be additional investment to what the investment we have at the moment. That is what the life cycle modelling is showing my officers through that data.
Thank you.
I think Sean could probably invest a lot more than this, but this is what we've got to invest. I think is the short answer to that, isn't it?
This is why we choose in an urban sort of area to use things like surface dressing. We appreciate that they can be quite controversial, because public don't necessarily understand the benefit, because a good surface dress road will last the same as a normal brand new surfaced road. So the reality is it's much cheaper, it's much greener, and that's why we use these processes, because it's about trying to stretch that funding to as much as we possibly can.
I'm just going to add to that at the moment the allocation across all authorities is based on the square meterage of road, and obviously in urban environment like Bristol, some of those roads work incredibly hard, and we know that. Whereas in some of the maybe more rural areas, you've got roads which are still paid for on the same square metre of adopted highway, but probably only see a handful of cars a day. So I certainly think that there's a case for us to have a discussion with the incoming Weka Mayor as to whether or not they simply continue to passport the allocation that comes from DFT according to the DFT formula, or if we might actually want to look at whether or not that allocation might be adjusted locally, which is the point of having combined authority, to recognise maybe the volumes of traffic using our roads. I think I saw, is it Don and then Kaz?
Actually, Sean, I just wanted to ask you one specific question on surface dressing in my ward, Greystoke Avenue, which is a concrete road, and you've done some work on that recently, but there are a few complaints about maybe some small deterioration, maybe some small potholes, irregularities and so on. Do you kind of come back to them, or does that need to be reported through Fix My Streets?
So we do revisit every surface dress road because there's what's known as a winter shed. And sometimes, depending on the winter, it can have a detrimental effect. So yeah, every road is revisited, and if there are specific issues, please let me know, and I will pass it on to officers to investigate.
And the sooner the better if it's been done recently, because it might be still under guarantee, which is
still on guarantee, exactly.
I'm going to suggest that they are on the screen, so I'm not going to read out every word in that rather large block of text that you can see on the screen, but that the transport and connectivity proposed indicative funding of, well, shall I just say 17.51 million, 0.56 million, 2.362 million from all the various sources. We authorise the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration in consultation with the Chair to take all steps necessary to invest up to 21.466 million of CRSTS maintenance, ITB, Transforming Cities funds, pothole and local funding as outlined in the report for both 25-26 and 26-27, and to roll over the underspend and to authorise in consultation with me all steps necessary to procure and award contracts necessary to deliver the works in Appendix A1. And in consultation with the Chair to make reasonable changes to the programme of works to ensure delivery of the programme and authorise the extension of the value of the existing highways and associated works framework if there's insufficient spend remaining to cover these works before the 20th of September 2025. So I'm moving that as a set of recommendations. Would anyone like to second that? Rob? No, I'm not going to repeat that. But if anyone is in doubt, it is displayed on the screen, and it is very clearly set out in bold on your paperwork. Well, we've had a competition here. Don, I'll accept. Do you mind if Don is minuted as seconding that? Thank you. So please could you raise your hand if you are in favour of the recommendations in this report? That's carried unanimously. Let's move swiftly on because we've still got a lot of business to do. So the next one of these is agenda item 11, City Centre Transport Corridor Temple Way full business case submission. And the purpose of this report is to seek approval from this committee to submit to the City Centre Transport Corridor Temple Way full business case to the West of England Combined Authority and all the usual delegations, if you don't want me to read them all out. So it's a key decision as it's a decision involving over £500,000 and impacting on 2 or more wards, and there is one change to the report which is included within an updated report published 30 minutes after the original report in the supplement pack. The figure in the capital cost has been updated from 4.407491 to 4.117783 million, which indicates costs post full business case. This report has an exempt information Appendix A. If anyone wants to discuss it, we can go into exempt session. And the item was originally on the forward plan as open and subsequently changed part exempt after completing the APR 15 process to update the information published. And we're going to get a little bit more on top of that because there's been a little bit too much of that, I'm afraid to say, hidden in business cases. So, Adam, would you like to introduce and outline the report?
Yep, so this is approving the FPC. So the scheme is a series of segregated cycle routes and bus lane enhancements along Temple Way, linking between Old Market and slightly further to the north the Concord Way down to the Friary. Works south of that will be part of the Bristol the Temple Quarter project. So segregated provision, we're also incorporating within this some fairly significant Section 106 contributions to upgrade the junction of Avon Street, creating that as a right turn with potential bus route to come through Avon Street. And that's been added into the project, so we're capturing a significant amount of Section 106 spending through doing that. The benefits of the scheme are coming in at a 6.22 cost benefit. That will reduce slightly, as we discussed with the Combined Authority about including inflation and such like, but it has a minimum BCR of 3, which is still very high value for money. So lots of benefits to the scheme. No particularly significant impacts on traffic from doing this scheme, and in terms of impact on the network, again, we think quite limited because Temple Way is by far our widest road, and we can manage the works within the existing highway. So I will leave it there. As I say, the recommendation is to approve submission of the FBC for approval at WECA committee.
And I think you mentioned to me the other day that taking out the roundabout, what was it called, Temple Circus roundabout, has made the entire network much more resilient and helped with the M32 as well. So it's worth just mentioning that as well, that this is part of kind of ongoing continuous improvement of that corridor. Has anyone got any questions? Mark?
Thank you, Chair. I confessed to being a bit torn on this one, and I understand what people are going on it, and it looks lovely and all the rest of it, but it's a lot of money for very little impact. So if you look at page 5, and you talk about the growth assumptions in active travel, there's maybe 57 more cycle trips. If you actually look through the comments later on, modal shift is unlikely to be a modal shift. We're paying a lot of money, and there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of benefit in this. I don't want to ask, am I missing something? Because actually, everyone's talking a good game and says this looks great and everything else, but the statistics in the report are saying it's going to have negligible impact other than making it look a bit tidier.
So each of these schemes is looked at kind of in isolation, if you like. So what we're creating here is a network. So this is creating links between various different routes for both buses and particularly for cycling, but also pedestrian enhancements. You get more modal shift when you remove some road space for cars, so you get less modal shift when you don't. If you look at the programme as a whole across the city centre, there are lots of elements that are taking out traffic capacity, and therefore that mode shift will happen across the whole area. The business case process kind of tries to just focus on one little element, and because not all of them are approved at the same time, you can't then say, but also because this traffic is coming from over here, we'll get that benefit as well. So in spite of that, it's still showing significant benefits compared to the costs. The AMAT and SSAT approach is a kind of scaled back approach that is more proportionate for smaller schemes compared to the Wurtham approach that's been done on other projects. But the benefits are still significant, and it's about creating that wider network that enables that transition to more sustainable modes across the whole city centre.
I think I go back to the benefit cost ratio, which is 6:1, which you won't see very often in Department for Transport methods.
No, I understand, Chair, and sorry to come back in, but again, it doesn't seem to be doing very much. The BCR looks great, but I'm not sure how the BCR is generated, considering there's no growth assumptions in walking. The cycling increase is negligible. We're only putting in 400 metres of additional bus lane. I'm not sure how we're getting the BCR where the BCR is.
I think part of it is the continuity when you add it up with other projects, as Adam's been saying. And certainly when, I think one of the problems that we've got at the moment is we've got all this CRSTS money to invest. We are also working on a movement plan for the city, which I believe will help us set out our vision much more clearly about how all these things fit together. Because at the moment, every time we bring something to this committee, it's something that in isolation people say, well, how's that going to make a difference? It's only a small thing. When we actually start adding up, aggregating all these different things, and we bring a movement plan, which I think is due for this autumn, then I think we'll be able to set out a bit more of a vision and people understand how the jigsaw fits together. I'm going to move over to Kaz now.
Yeah, just very briefly, I'm supportive of this scheme, but for me, there's also an equalities part to this, and kind of hear about things like women don't like cycling because they want segregated cycle lanes. I was on the doorstep just yesterday and somebody said to me they've got an autistic son and they'd love to take him cycling, but it's not safe to do so. So I see this as a bigger picture, and I think that's kind of would be my response to Mark's point on just the sort of cost of it.
Nick.
Thanks. I'm generally okay with this one, actually. I think we get improved bus flows north-south. We've got the additional pedestrian crossing at Avon Street, giving that east-west connectivity, which is a real improvement in that location. And that off-road cycle lane is certainly preferable to riding through the underpass, as I have done. However, I would ask that officers look again at the connections for that cycle lane. I know I'm not supposed to design in committee, but the northern end of it just appears in a pavement close to Old Market Street, whereas we do have a segregated cycle lane that goes to the central reservation of Old Market Street and then kicks to the north. So we need some kind of connection for that missing 10 metres between those sections. Otherwise, you've got to get off your bike, walk across the road on a pedestrian signal, and then go around that pinch point. Right, it is a pinch point. I can see why it's difficult. And then same again at the southern end. That express cycle path just deposits you onto a bit of shared surface paving, whereas another 5-10 metres would get you onto Friary, which is the connection with the railway station and NCN4 going off to the east. And also the underpass at Broad Plain. That's so close to being on the red line boundary of the scheme, but it's not in it, and that's the most horrible underpass that goes underneath. And we've got 4.1 million. We had 4.4 million a week ago, so clearly there's £300,000 going spare. Can we make the underpass nicer?
I don't know if you want to come back on that, Adam.
I'd say, yeah, I was just checking. The crossing up at Old Market Roundabout is a toucan crossing, so you wouldn't have to dismount to join. There is a difficult pinch point there. We have been developing designs for how better to connect the railway path to Old Market and onward routes like Castle Park. So I'll ask the team to look at improvements in that area as part of that. Broad Plain, there's an urban realm scheme going on there to improve Broad Plain itself. The tunnel, the subway, sorry, I don't think is being looked at in detail at the moment, but I will take that back to the team and see if there is ways to improve it more significantly. The bottom end by the Friary, there is a scheme coming forward as part of the Temple Quarter scheme to put in a transport interchange at the Friary. There is still a challenge, I think, outstanding of how we connect the Victoria Street cycle route to the Friary cycle route that will take you across the Cheese Grater Bridge and beyond. So there is some work still to be done around that junction, I think.
I think it's fair to say that we have to take an incremental approach. We can't sort it all out once. I hope at least at the Old Market area you're reassured that that's a toucan. I'm going to move this now that this committee approves the submission of the Templeway FBC for approval at WECA committee, all WECA directors, and authorises all the usual delegations, procure contracts, and do whatever it takes to get it in. Everyone in favour, please raise your...
Seconder, please.
Oh, sorry, a seconder. Kaz. And everyone in favour, please raise your hands. So that's 8 people. So that's Don, Tim, Kaz, Nick, Rob, Emma, David and Ed. Against, none, and then abstaining is Mark Weston. Let's move on. We've got another one to go, which is agenda item 12, Pedestrian Priority at standalone push-button crossings in Bristol. And this is to seek approval to the rollout of pre-time max settings on signal-controlled standalone push-button pedestrian crossings across the city, which is a key decision because it involves pretty much all, I think, the wards in Bristol. And I'm inviting Sean to introduce and outline the report.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So on crossings, we can actually change settings within the crossings to enable pedestrian call to come more quickly, which obviously promotes pedestrians and they don't have to stand there. I have to say out that it is standalone crossings. It cannot be done at junctions. Some of the crossing, there's about 100 crossings within the city, up to 100 crossings, which we could potentially roll this out to, which would be part of the project. Some of those might be too old to accept it, but that's part of technical work which the team will do as they roll the project forward. But obviously, if they're old crossings in the reasonably future, hopefully we will be upgrading those crossings. And obviously, as part of the policy going forward, if it's accepted tonight, we will ensure that pre-time max is put into new crossings as they're standalone crossings as they're installed as well. Like I say, I think it's quite a positive element and a positive report. So I don't think there's much more to say, Chair.
I think the only other thing to say is that if in any individual site is not working very well, then it can be reversed fairly simply. So I think it's a question of kind of suck it and see and monitor it and make sure that any adverse effects we can manage on a case-by-case approach.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I forgot that element. I mean, it is something we can reverse quite easily. So the team do intend monitoring where they've undertaken the change. And obviously, if it is causing significant issues, then that's something which we can reconsider and relook at. But the intention is to try and give the priority to the pedestrians.
Thank you, Chair. Assuming you're starting at this end? Yes. Yeah, okay, cool. Just, if it doesn't work and it's unpicked, how quickly can you do that? My fear is obviously is rush hour, congestion and all that kind of problem where you can inadvertently, and we have seen it, when buttons and syncing goes out of phase just because of an error with the lights, you cause gridlock in whole areas. How quickly could we unpick it? Right.
Yeah, I'm James.
It's all his fault.
Hello. I'm the Signals and Traffic Control Manager. In short, yes, we can change it back very quickly with a handset device. So if problems cropped up, yes, it's a very quick change, alteration.
And if I may, just because I want to understand this better. So if you're a junction, well, obviously you're not a junction, but if you're at a junction and it's, four-way pedestrian crossings, that's a bit different. That's all in sync, isn't it? So actually that's phased, that's not being touched.
This can only work on standalone pedestrian push buttons. It cannot work at junctions at all.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
I think there's probably even one or two standalones that I can think of right now that may not actually be able to do this because they're so close to sensitive junctions. Yeah. So I think we'll do this. I think actually it can be reversed very, very quickly because if there's a power outage of the controller, sometimes we've done this a little bit in Windmill Hill in my ward, had this priority. There's a power outage and it went back to the default settings. So I'm hoping that the technical team... Well, I'm hoping that the technical team will find a way either to make sure that that doesn't happen or respond quickly if it does where it's working. David.
Thank you, Chair. My question is a follow-up to what you just said. I understand that third-party contractors visit some sites and can reset the crossings to factory defaults. I'm just wondering if we can actually somehow set the factory default to be instant green for those crossings so that third parties do not muck around with our settings.
So obviously the contractors are we got a term contract which is actually with the whole west of England. So if we have the policy to say that it pre-time max, that our contractor who is across the west of England will know that that is the policy for Bristol, and so won't be turning them back unless instructed. They go by instruction of work. not necessarily just turn up to do something, if you sort of mean. It is always by instruction.
So that's really good communication with James and the team and the contractor. Emma.
Thank you. I'm really, really excited about this. You know I am. This has really helped our ward a lot. I started, and thank you to James who got this started, with Ashley Down Road, which is an absolute nightmare for speeding cars. There are 3 primary schools off Ashley Down Road, so they are school routes. We're in an area where there's not much SIL money for traffic calming measures or things like that. And doing this to prioritise the children getting to school, just at the push of a button, has been amazing. You know, rather than they wanted another crossing, and we couldn't afford that. So this has actually made those crossings so effective for the school routes. So that was brilliant. And then when people realised what had happened, I got phone calls going, could we have one down here and there, and it would be really useful here. And yeah, so you know, residents really love them, and it's such a cost-effective way to get those traffic calming measures in and to help with things like school routes. So yeah, big fan. The only time I get calls from residents about them now is when they revert. So if there's a power cut or somebody's gone and done any tinkering, they can sometimes revert, and people are noticing that they reverted. So that's just something I think to bear in mind. But yeah, I'm really happy to support this.
And I think actually the school's point is really important, because if there's a large delay and there's a large volume of children at the same time, it actually becomes quite a difficult position on the pavement with everyone waiting. Rob, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I just wanted to check, has this been done in other cities? And it's just quite surprising that it hasn't happened here before now. So like, has there been other places that have done this?
There is pre-time max settings in other cities. We've historically had them in Bristol as well. We've got a few sites already.
Right.
In fact, South Gloucestershire, where I live, has got a couple of crossings on pre-time max as well. I don't know if there's any other city that has made this decision that you're considering tonight. I don't know the answer to that.
Thanks. So it's £20,720. That sounds like really good money spent. I know, you know, visiting 100 sites, could you just kind of give us an indication whenabouts, is that a word? You will be finishing the work? Like, when do you expect to finish the work? I don't think that was in the papers necessarily, but you might be able to say a rough. I know you don't like giving dates and stuff, but just a rough estimation.
At the moment, the team are still working through the detail, because, as I said, some of the sites are old, so we might not be able to do some, so they're still working through that detail. That's something I can come back to you with once we have an actual clear programme of works, because we're the same team and the same resources are also doing the LED replacement of the traffic signal heads, which again is quite important to ensure we reduce our energy, green, carbon emissions and so on. So again, unfortunately it is always the same resources, and it will be the same resources delivering the CRSTS traffic signal schemes and so on. So I need to take whilst we were keen to roll this out as quickly as we can, I do need to take into account the pressures across trying to deliver all these aspects over the next year or so.
I've got a slightly pointed reason why I asked for the date specifically, because I noted in the papers that Wolverhampton introduced the first traffic signals in 1926, and of course next year is 2026. So if we can do it by then and show the progress that's been made in 100 years to prioritise pedestrians, then we could be on something there.
We will take that into account and endeavour to do the best we can, Councillor. But as I said, I do have to, obviously, there's a lot of priorities, conflicting priorities to deliver a number of aspects.
I think
I can't hit it today, say I can hit that target.
I think this is a really good moment to say this is an incredibly hard-working committee. We've had incredibly large volume of papers over I think this is the 5th or 6th thing. There's an incredible workload that has been put onto the officers, and actually now they're delivering all of what we've asked them to do. So I think the officer team is actually at capacity, and we'll go gentle. So we ask them to prioritise this alongside all the other pressures we're putting on them. I'm going to move that we approve rollout of pre-time max on standalone pedestrian crossings across the city. Would someone like to second that, please? Emma. I thought you might want to, and your hand went up very fast there. So, everyone in favour of that, please put up your hand. That's carried unanimously. And so now we're moving on to a Hackney Carriage fare review. This is to seek approval for a revised table of fares for Hackney Carriage vehicles. It's a key decision because it involves 2 or more wards. Sean, you're going to introduce and outline this report. Thank you, James, for your help today. I'm going to mention that I've been involved in this before as an officer, and we had quite a lot of toing and froing, and I'm really pleased to see that we've had some very measured and sensible suggestions come in, and we've been able to accept them all and move them to this committee for recommendation. So I hope that I haven't cut across your wind in what you were going to say there, Sean. Maybe I have. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry you have, but that's your entitlement, Chair. So yeah, as Ed set out, the licensing for fare increases for taxis is basically has become from the industry to us, but over the years we've worked with them to try and make sure that their ask is reasonable and within sort of inflation and so on. The team have looked at this. They felt that the application from the industry was fair and reasonable, but have investigated it. They've not just taken that at face value. So we've, as you can see, we've put in some tariff and different tables in there, which set out, which I won't go into detail. But the team do believe that what has been asked by the industry is fair and reasonable. So we're bringing it here to you tonight to basically approve the revised rates for Hackney Carriage.
And it's worth mentioning that the chair of the other committee, licensing. Sorry, yes.
Sorry, I meant to add my other technical expert sat behind me, because obviously you can is quite broad. Is that this will be subject to consultation as well.
I think the other thing to mention is that I think every single one of the Hackney cabs is disabled friendly, wheelchair compliant, and so this is an important part of the mix for our inclusive transport system and an important part of accessibility. Obviously we're facing a lot of competition from app-based minicabs, many of which are licensed beyond our boundaries and over which we have very little control. So it's good to see that there's still a significant fleet of Hackney cabs, making sure that we've got controlled prices without subject to surging, and which are accessible. Did anyone want to make any comments? Shall I move straight to a vote that we approve the So can I move the recommendations that the Committee for Transport Connectivity approve the revised table of fares in respect of Hackney Carriage vehicles, note that the statutory objection process outlined in this report, and authorise the Director, in consultation with the Chair, in the event that objections are received and not withdrawn, to consider the objection to decide whether the table of fares should come into force and whether this should be with or without modifications. Can I have a seconder for that, please? Rob. And can we raise your hand to indicate for the recommendations in the report? So that's carried unanimously. Let's move on. Next agenda item is 14, the City Centre Bedminster Bridges Outline Business Case and Construction Delivery. So the purpose of this report is to submit the outline business case to WECA, which, if approved, would secure funding to continue development of the project up to the FBC stage, to authorise the Executive Director, in consultation with the Chair, to do all the steps necessary to get it in place should the outline business and line up the FBC should the OBC be approved by the committee. Delegate approval to the subsequent FBC to the Executive Director in consultation with the Chair, and note that ordinarily no physical works would start until after FBC approval. However, to accelerate delivery and meeting CRSTS funding deadlines, this report still seeks permission to start construction works on site to deliver the proposals after OBC approval, in parallel to seeking FBC approval. This is a key decision, as it's a decision involving over £500,000, and the same as the other two things that has exemption information at Appendix E, which if we need to discuss, we can go into exempt thing. This was originally on the floor plan as open, but subsequently changed to part exempt after completing APR 15 process to update the information published. Adam, would you like to outline this report for us?
Yeah, thanks. So those recommendations, fairly important, obviously slightly different approach in terms of seeking delegated authority to approve the FBC and to start works prior to the FBC approval. That the rationale for that being that the benefits are significant of the scheme. The design is worked up to a high level of detail. We responded to public engagement requests and made significant changes to the project. So I guess we've got a lot to do, and as part of this we will be refurbishing the two bridges as well, so re-waterproofing the decks on the existing bridges to add maintenance benefit to the scheme. We're seeking to accelerate delivery to ensure we can deliver within the TRSTS timescales. We've talked a lot about benefits and other types of schemes. I just wanted to kind of maybe give a comparison for this scheme. It's quite similar to what we did in the city centre and also Temple Circus. So whilst it looks like you're taking out lots of road space and capacity, actually what we're doing is rationalising the movements, and that is retaining most of the capacity whilst then freeing up space to use for other modes. So the overall capacity of the junction only decreases very slightly from current to existing, despite changing how the space is allocated. So when we did the city centre as an example, we removed a couple of movements. Previously you could go to absolutely everywhere in the city centre, removed a couple of movements, and that enabled everything to work a lot better. So the changes to this to these junctions rationalise those turning movements, which means there are more efficient junctions and therefore less delay, so you can give more green time to the different movements, which is where you then get the capacity back. That enables us then to bring in the bus-only sections and the walking and cycling links. The scheme connects up a number of key segregated cycle routes that currently just terminate in Bedminster Bridges roundabout, which is a huge blocker to movement and has significant accidents associated with it, or collisions, sorry. So it does all those connections and then also provides segregation for buses through the roundabout. One point to note, if you've been looking at the modelling in terms of the buses, this modelling takes a fair piece of time to complete. What was discovered partway through was that the southbound bus movement from Redcliffe Hill to Bedminster Parade, which is a lot of the the buses that serve South Bristol, was getting delayed because currently you've got a give way there and then there's not many traffic lights after that, and then we've put in place 2 or 3 sets of lights. So when the modelling was completed, because there was significant benefits northbound and significant benefits to the Metro bus route that goes out to Long Ashton, those are being offset by the southbound bus disbenefit, if you like. So when the modelling was done, and this reflects in the benefits, there wasn't any changes made to bus journey times because it was considered to be a kind of balanced effect. What we've done since that, we've been carrying on working on the designs and revised the staging, made a couple of changes that has removed that delay to southbound buses. So the southbound buses are now largely the same journey time as they are currently, but you get significant benefits northbound and significant benefits for the Metrobus route, and you also get the reliability. So the other reason for comparing this to something like the city centre and Temple Circus is prior to those junctions being updated, they used to lock up quite a lot. So whenever we had an incident on the network, traffic would effectively queue in a circle, block itself, and nothing would go anywhere. That tends to happen at Bedminster Bridges as well because it's a signalised gyratory. It has the capacity to lock itself up, particularly when there are issues on the network. So changing it to a series of T-junctions, which can have appropriate yellow boxes and such like, enables us to better manage the network, and also to better or to more quickly unravel congestion when it happens. So one of the key changes on the city centre meant that when there was big congestion, it dissipated a lot more quickly than it used to, because then the network could unlock itself a lot more quickly. So that's one of the other key benefits is kind of rationalising the road network to make it simpler. So we did the consultation, and there were a number of changes made following that. So I won't run through them all in detail, but we restored some banned traffic movements following consultation, improved the bus priority and reliability, as I've talked about, and put in some additional cycle track connections. So one of the key ones is a link now that goes all the way from White House Street right the way across to St John's Lane, creating a segregated cycle route on the south side of the river, connecting up all the other routes. Various other changes and improvements made as well. Some refinements for walking and wheeling, so some continuous footways and a new path near Waring House, and also improvements to safety with a 20 mile per hour speed limit, and introduction of a red route to prevent vehicles stopping outside loading and parking bays. The bus priority now would go from one end of East Street all the way through to the city centre, and from the new bus lane on Malago Road all the way through to the city centre for the northbound movement. Just to repeat then that the two bridges will be repaired as well as part of this process. The BCR is currently showing 2. My view would be that is very much a worst case scenario. When the bus benefits are recalculated and remodelled, that will go significantly higher. And as I say, the junction itself can accommodate the same volumes of traffic. Obviously, there have been changes to traffic patterns by banning some of the movements, and that would result in different movement patterns, and some traffic will divert to other areas. But we're confident that the new design can accommodate the volume of traffic required. So I think I will probably leave it there. As I say, the recommendations are a little bit more complicated than what we would do normally. That's because we're trying to accelerate the project to ensure we deliver it within the CRSTS window.
And can you just say something about the fact that this is a very advanced OBC to justify some of these recommendations?
Yeah, so the design is very detailed. Some of the projects in the programme will do a kind of high-level OBC, and then a more detailed FBC will go straight to FBC. The design for this is very detailed. We've done lots of modelling, we've done lots of consultation and engagement. Hence, we believe that the risk of starting works prior to FBC is very low. What the FBC does is fine-tune the OBC, fine-tune the design, and fine-tune the economics and the kind of procurement of the scheme. That will still happen. The FBC will still be done. We're already fine-tuning design all the way throughout the process, which we do continuously anyway. So our view is it's very low risk, and the FBC will still be completed and will kind of square the circle, if you like. But our recommendation is to approve it at this point in time.
So, after that very comprehensive explanation, thank you. Have we got any questions? Tim?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Yeah, I think we think this is a pretty good scheme overall. Our Councillor Clark from Bedminster did put in a statement earlier, which went in amongst about 1,000 other statements. So I just wanted to kind of bring those to the committee. She made a particular point about the traffic count data being done in September 2020. Right in the middle of the pandemic, showing a lot of people walking, and that's not surprising. So have we done any more recent data on that, and can we include that in the FBC if that's the case? So that's my first question. And the second one, which is sort of similar to something Emma asked earlier, the impact assessments don't go outside the area to sort of South Bristol, and a lot of people travel in from South Bristol. It's a main route across from there. So, can we see impact assessments for sort of Bedminster, Filwood, Bishopsworth, and can that go into maybe into the FBC as well?
Yeah, so I think it's a slight misunderstanding of the EQIA in that the EQIA applies to everyone, so everyone is assessed when we're looking at the different criteria. It looks at a couple of areas in more detail because they're closer to the scheme, but it is assessing the impacts on all users in essence. We can certainly expand that a bit further as we develop the FBC, and I'll ask, as I say, before, the EQIA is always a living document, so I'll certainly feed that back, and I've already passed a statement onto the team. In terms of the traffic counts, there was a variety of traffic counts used throughout the modelling process. One of those was in 2020, but we also had counts from 2013, 2019, 2022 and 2024. And one element that we will put into the EQIA, which is missing at the moment, is a count from 2024 that looks at total pedestrian, cycle, bus and other vehicle counts going through the roundabout. So yes, we'll add that data into EQIA, and also the modelling is based on a variety of different modelling sources and different count data. It has been a challenging time for traffic counts because of the pandemic and lots of change in movements. Cumberland Road Busgate as well, significantly impacting flows in that area.
Okay, great, thanks. And can I just ask as well, just a bit of confusion about the advantages of approving the OBC but the FBC not coming back to committee for approval. It's my understanding that WECA can't approve the money until the FBC is done. Is that correct? So we can't actually spend, because I thought the idea was that we could start spending money now.
Yeah, so they have created an acceleration program about how to accelerate the overall CRCS program, and one of the agreements in that was to fund schemes at OBC where they're worked up to a sufficient level of detail. The mechanism for that is called an early works package, where effectively you say we're applying for money to get started whilst this bit is being completed. So we'll discuss the exact mechanism of how that works with the combined authority, but yes, they have put in place an approach that enables us to secure the funding at the earliest stage.
Okay, so they have the power to do that, did they? Because I thought it would be DFT that would have to agree that.
So it's for the combined authority to allocate the grant. They have to report what they're doing to the DFT. This is not a DFT retained scheme like some of the others are.
Okay, thanks.
I'd just like to update. I had an update today on the EQIAs, and now no scheme will be accepted by the Quality Assurance Committee without an EQIA at the initial stages, which I think is extremely important. And at the QA3 stage, when things are signed off, it will require, before anything can be signed off, an EQIA fully signed off by a director. And even then, I think the EQIA is an ongoing process of improvement and assessment. So I'm really pleased to see that we're no longer going to get something which is coming to this committee where the EQIA appears to be signed off fairly close to the timing for this committee. So it's now going to be much more embedded throughout the development of all schemes. So I've got Kaz, then Mark. Yeah.
Just to add very quickly, obviously we still do have to get everything approved by WECA, having brought it to committee. We still need to get the funding signed off. That will be the next process.
So Kaz.
Yeah, lots of good things for sustainable transport and also the removal of the underpass. So that's really good. Just one maybe sort of technical thing. I note that from Bedminster Parade, and this will be of concern to maybe some people from South Bristol travelling this way, an extra 2 minutes in the middle of the day, an extra 4 minutes in peak afternoon to get through that junction. And my question is there anything you could do in terms of phasing of traffic lights to kind of help traffic flow?
Yeah, so we've been continually reviewing the design and the phasing. As I say, the modelling kind of starts here and then it's building up all through the business case. But you have to have a point in the sand where you've gone, that's what we're modelling, because these big models take a long time to run. Alongside that process, we're doing Linsig modelling. So very quick modelling lesson. You have Wharton modelling, which is a strategic region-wide model. You then have Visim modelling, which covers a number of different junctions, and you have Linsig modelling, which looks at one junction in a lot of detail. So the Linsig model is the one that we're working on to fine-tune everything, looking at the different staging movements and making sure we reduce the delays as far as possible. Some movements will get a bit slower, some movements will get quicker. Because some of it is give way, naturally they will get slower because you're not going to give way anymore. But also this will help to reduce the number of collisions that those giveaways tend to lead to. The worst accident spots are around the giveaway junctions.
So just a question on what you were saying earlier, that if this goes ahead, traffic will move elsewhere. I won't use flow, I don't want to trigger anyone. But if the traffic moves elsewhere, where is it moving to, and has that been the impact of those other areas been analysed?
So there will be some movement of traffic. It is in the modelling report where it would go to. I would say that the Wordton modelling is very high level and gives you indications of the sort of things that will happen. So there are a number of band turn movements that necessitate people taking a different movement. Generally, they're fairly light movements. What the modelling indicates is that if there is traffic moving elsewhere because of congestion, etc., it would head towards the Cumberland Basin and potentially St John's Lane. I think we've been refining the scheme and refining the model. So having looked at the total capacity of the junction now, it's essentially the same as the capacity. Having looked at the total capacity of the junction as designed currently, it's essentially the same as the capacity of the existing layout. Some of the movements will be different, and there are small movements that you have to do by different routes because you can't do those turns anymore. A number of them, like you can't turn right from York Road to head north anymore, means you make your decision at Bath Bridges rather than making it at Bedminster Bridges.
Nick.
Thanks. There's a surprising overlap in the membership of this committee and the audit committee, to which I'm the vice chair, and Councillor Rippington was chair of until very recently. And I mention this because of the governance proposal that we're given here to delegate approval of full business case to officers for £14 million. And I think that would set quite a bad precedent. We have a limit at which projects should come to committee. And if you're willing to circumvent good governance for a good reason, then there's no reason why you wouldn't do it for a bad one down the line. And so if a full business case still needs to be produced, it still needs to go to WECA, it still needs to fit within their meeting cycle, and it seems to me to be a shortcut too far to say that it would be utterly impossible to bring it to this committee.
We could bring it to committee for approval. Essentially what we're looking to do is to start works before it gets signed off. So it's not that we couldn't bring it to committee, it's that if we've signed off the funding and started the works, is there value in committee in looking at that? We could always provide, for example, an update via email as to what the FBC, what the changes have been. I think the point of the OBC FBC process is to refine the scheme. In this instance, the scheme is very, very detailed at OBC stage, so there is limited additionality from that FBC, which is why I appreciate the point you're making about the reduced governance, but that's why we feel it's reasonable in this situation. And generally we would always try to come with the FBC, but in order to meet the funding timescales and get the maintenance done at the same time, that's what we're recommending for this project, and we will recommend for one other project as well.
You've made your point, yeah. Okay, so you didn't want to come back on what Adam said. So David.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm also on Audit Committee, and I used to reading documents like this. I note on bottom of page 2278 in paragraph 12, a paper will be brought to committee when these proposals are finalised to update how the programme will be de-risked and managed and what the scope of the final programme is. So it will be coming back to this committee for approval of some sort.
So that's a paper for the wider programme to talk about the sort of issues and what we're doing in terms of de-risking. As I say, this FBC can come back. It's just is there value in it if we follow the approach we're suggesting.
So I'm going to move that the recommendations are to approve the detailed proposals and Bedminster Bridges and approaches which have been revised following consultation, approve submission of the OBC to WECA, which, if approved, would secure funding to continue development to FBC. And you can all read it for yourselves, but authorise the standard delegations to the Executive Director, but also to include the fact that we will be moving to commence construction works on site after OBC approval in parallel to seeking FBC approval, and note that the relevant and to approve and submit the FBC. Note that the relevant traffic regulation orders and variation of existing orders will be advertised and made for the proposals in consultation with the chair of the committee, and approve commencement of physical works on site after OBC approval in parallel to seeking FBC approval. Sorry? Well, hopefully you've all read it, because that's very much what was. I'm just apparently have to read it all out. Sorry, that's my job as. My job as the chair, and hopefully you've read it and recognised more or less all those words in slightly truncated form. So would anyone like to second this motion? David. And can I ask for a show of hands in favour of this? So that's Rob, Emma, David, Kaz, Tim, Don and Ed. Against? That's Mark and Nick. I nearly called you Tim there. Nick.
So that's carried.
So that's carried 7 votes to 2. Now, lastly, we've just reached the end of our allotted time, but we have extended the booking for this meeting so that we can actually continue to the very final item on the agenda, which is to brief the committee on performance against BCC business plan as relevant to the remit of the committee, and for members to note specific areas of interest or concern with relevant directors. And I'd just like to note that we are currently refreshing the corporate strategy. I think this committee, Mark, particularly as you haven't been to all of them, has noted on a number of occasions that some of the KPIs we're measuring are no longer necessarily the same KPIs or priorities of the current administration. So we're a little bit backlog, but nevertheless, there's some very interesting information in here. So Alex, would you like to say anything to introduce this report?
Thank you, Chair. So you've largely introduced it, but so this is performance against the business plan up until the end of the calendar year, so up until the end of December last year, but that's Q3 for the financial year. And as well as it being the business plan that is of course due for an update, there's about a 10 to 12 week lag, which is why we're talking about Q3 here. So there is an appendix which you can access, which is well, there's appendices. There's the dashboard, which is a Power BI file which you can access through the document, and then a separate document which is a performance measures and target for the financial year as well. Just to summarise, as you see, there's 3 of the 8 business plan actions are not on track, so 5 of them are. So that's around things like the delivery of the package around the arena, as of Q3, the delivery of the East Bristol livable neighbourhood, and then around improvements to the number 2 route and relations there with the mass transit business case. Obviously, decision made tonight will improve the number 2 bus route once that's delivered. Just to sort of pick out a few points that I haven't mentioned yet, there's often a discussion here about road safety and the number of people being killed or seriously injured, and we're seeing that casualties for pedestrians are falling, but starting to rise around other road users, and we'll continue to look into that, and we'll continue to have discussions with the police about the data that they have available. Also, you'll see point 8, quality of life data. So quality of life survey is now available, and that does show quite a marked increase of people who are are reporting that traffic congestion is a problem in their area. There's an explanation or suggestion that that's largely due to traffic now starting to return to pre-pandemic levels in some places because of more people now working within offices. I'll leave it there and open to questions and try and answer. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Alex. And we haven't even started building CRSTS yet, and people are getting worried about congestion, so that's an interesting fact. The other one I was really pleased by is that for the same period pre-pandemic, we've now got the highest level of bus patronage, and we look to have the highest level ever by the end of the year. So that's, I think, something that's really positive, particularly as we've actually got fewer bus routes. So that's something that implies to me that either there's very full buses out there, or at least some very successful routes out there. Tim.
Yeah, Chair. I was just going to raise that very point actually, and the fact something that has come up in the bus task and finish, so not everybody will be aware of it, is that although, as we are back on track to have more passengers than ever, there are a number of key routes where the frequency was cut a while ago, and those frequencies haven't been restored. So we in that task and finish group, we're discussing with officers to push first on that and why they're not restoring those. So I would also ask, Adam and Alex to put their weight behind that, because I think that's quite important, rather than us spending our own money on trying to encourage them to up the frequency. The numbers are there, so hopefully they'll do it. Was also going to raise about what was I going to raise? Sorry. Yeah, certainly on the traffic congestion, just interesting that that's gone up heavily in the previous year. I think it is important to remember that the city is growing and will be growing by 20% or something in the next 10-15 years, and whatever people think, their car journeys are not going to get easier as a result of that, and therefore the infrastructure work that we're doing to try and make it easier to get around by bus, car and walking, it is important, but it will also be a case of the bus companies stepping up, or WECA or whoever stepping up to improve the actual public transport once we provide the infrastructure for them to do so.
And I think you're right that our transport strategy from 2019 says that with the population and jobs growth, just to stand still with congestion, we need to reduce the number of people travelling to work by car from 53% to 43%. And if we do nothing, then we're going to have a bit of a problem. There's also a maybe slightly provocative transport academic based in Bristol who says we will never solve congestion. All we'll ever do is make it less bad than it would have been otherwise. Maybe that's a good way of teeing you up, Mark, but I don't know if you wanted to look at that bit or something else.
I think we've had the contentious bits, Chair. Mine was actually just, obviously, as you would expect, linking to TC 2.1, the YTL Arena. I was actually chatting to Councillor Dudd earlier about this. I know you're not doing mitigations yet, and I get it. We've obviously heard there's a delay till 2028, I think it is. As part of that scheme for it, they've committed that if there's an impact by the arena on parking in the surrounding areas, which is, Southmead and Henbury Brentry, then they have to put in a mitigation place, a scheme to stop it, event parking scheme or something else. So what I'd hate for us to do is get to the arena open and then go, oh, we've not monitored the parking. Because we don't have a base to judge it against whether it's got worse, we're going to cause a problem. So Red Row are the final bit of housing in that area building, and they're selling now. So within about 6 months, we'll know what the parking is. Could we do the survey? Because if we don't put that as a plan to do the parking survey at some point, we'll never get it done, and then we won't have a baseline. We won't know if things have got worse, and then we can't trigger money from YTL to put in the mitigation.
Well, Thank you, Chair, and thank you. We'll take that away, and I think also it's important that even if the arena is delayed to 2028, there's the suggestions of the increased capacity means they'll be required to have more engagement with the planning authority and new planning application, and that will require a new transport assessment as well, so we can look at that.
I think we've probably we're all fairly worn out now, aren't we? So I don't see any other hands up. I am going to suggest that this committee note the performance against the business plan relevant to this committee, including the issues raised and measures to address performance issues to be implemented by the relevant services, and to note that there's a process underway to refresh the corporate strategy. And I hope to engage this committee in some way in making sure that we are able to have things that are meaningful to us moving forwards. I'm going to note the report as per the recommendation. I'm going to thank you all for a very engaging meeting and for your attendance. Nice to see you, Mark. The next meeting of the Transport and Connectivity Policy Committee is 5 p.m. on the 15th of May, and I'm very hopeful that we'll see Graham back in full health again, and we'll be very pleased to see him back at this committee. No slight on you at all, but it's nice to know that Graham is recovering. Great.